Chapter 129. Soon, Wu Qi and his companions arrived at the bottom of the steel city. When they were still about 1 mile away from the purple-red flame pillar, Wu Qi could already feel a scorching heat coming right at his face, and a scorching smell came from his hair. The innate true fire energy in his fire meridians was activated, absorbing the heat from the surroundings and quickly transforming it into true fire energy, which flowed through his body. Instantly, he felt a cool sensation coming from his body. A rope ladder was hanging down from above, and the leader of the group grabbed the rope ladder and began climbing up step by step. Wu Qi let out a clear cry and sprung up into the sky. With a few light kicks on the rope ladder with the tip of his feet, he had already climbed up to the steel city. Down below, the soldiers hurriedly brought their impatient mounts and retreated into the distance. The heat from the underground fire was too strong, and it was not suitable for them to stay here for long. Only when they reached the top of the city did Wu Qi get a clear view of the steel city. The city was roughly circular, with a diameter of 3 miles. The huge disc-shaped base was about 1,000 feet thick, and the top of the city was a flat ground. All kinds of buildings were built here and there were countless flower beds and bushes, hiding these buildings under the shade of greenery. However, the heat from the underground fire was too strong, and all the flowers and trees were fire elemental plants. Among them, there were many fire elemental spirit herbs, and they were all thousands of years old. There were already a few men in hemp garments waiting at the exit of the rope ladder. Seeing Wu Qi quickly leaping up, a tall man with a simple and honest expression bowed to Wu Qi and said with a deep voice, "Chief General has been waiting for a long time. Mr. Wu Qi, please follow me." Before Wu Qi could answer, the man smiled, turned and walked towards a tall tower made of pure metal in the center of the city. This tower was 1,080 feet tall, and according to the number of heavenly dipper and earthly evils, it was divided into 108 floors. The tower had 12 corners, which corresponded to the number of 12 yuan chens. There were a total of 3,650 bronze bells ringing in the wind, which also corresponded to the number of stars in the sky. Wu Qi observed with his spirit eyes, and found that this tower was aimed right at the underground fire pillar right below the city. For this pillar of fire to be able to support such a city made of pure steel in midair, it could be seen that it contained absolute power. Such a huge amount of power was restrained within the tower, flowing rapidly along the countless array patterns within the tower. This tower was the core of the steel city's array formation, and the powerful energy contained within it could be transformed into a terrifying attack at any time to kill the enemy. According to Wu Qi's estimation, the underground fire energy contained in this tower was approximately equal to the total power possessed by 1,000 human immortals of Jin Dan. Such a large city was like a storage battery, with an enormous amount of underground fire energy stored in the tower as the core. Once all the energy was released at the same time, the instantaneous lethality was more than enough to kill an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Even celestial immortals who had formed their nascent divinities, low-level celestial immortals, could be severely wounded. This was an extremely powerful weapon of mass destruction. In fact, it was the prototype of a magic treasure. It was just that he didn't know who had the ability to borrow the flames from the Earth's core to create such a huge magic treasure. Looking at the tower, Wu Qi could not help but feel his mouth watering, and could not help but keep swallowing a mouthful of saliva. The man brought Wu Qi all the way to the bottom of the tower, and entered through a door that was carved with the painting of fishing, herding, farming, and forest in 4 seasons. The interior of the tower was completely empty, without any furnishings. The ground was inlaid with various metal alloy threads, and countless fire element energy stones were densely packed on top of it. There was no staircase in the tower, and there was only a round hole about 10 feet in diameter in the middle of the floor of each floor. A faint red light shone out from the bottom of the tower through the hole, shooting straight into all the floors above. Following the man into the faint red light, Wu Qi felt his body lightened. He flew up along with the red light, and suddenly arrived at the highest floor of the tower. Clad in a black robe, Jing Ku was sitting in a corner of this floor, overlooking the beautiful scenery of the sunset through the window. 2 large wine jars were placed right next to him. While admiring the beautiful scenery, he scooped out some fine wine from a large white jade wine funnel and poured it into his mouth. A strong smell of alcohol emanated from his body, and even the pores on his face were enlarged. It was unknown how much wine he had drunk, as his face had turned so red that it looked like blood was going to ooze out from it. In other places, Jingku was a man of great character who attracted the attention of many people. However, in this tower, there was a middle-aged man who sat in the center of an array in the south position. He was like a bright pearl or a beautiful jade, attracting the attention of all the people. Just by sitting there, Wu Qi had no choice but to place all his attention on him. The middle-aged man had a delicate and handsome face, and a long beard grew on his chin. His facial features were not outstanding, but his eyes were extremely bright. They were tens of times brighter than the North Star that Wu Qi saw on Earth, under the unpolluted night sky of the Sahara Desert. Although it was a pair of bright eyes, they did not give off any aggressive feeling. Instead, they were as clear as water. When Wu Qi looked into his eyes, he felt his entire body relax, and he could not help but reveal a pleased smile. "Old Mr. MOD? Greetings from Wu Qi." Looking at the man, Wu Qi knew instinctively that he was MOD. His facial features were not outstanding, his stature was not tall or mighty, and he did not emanate any overbearing aura either. Even his dressing was similar to that of his disciples, barefooted, wearing a coarse linen shirt, and with a few strands of black soil under his fingernails. He looked no different from an old farmer in the countryside. But he was MOD, and Wu Qi would never mistake him for someone else. For some unknown reason, MOD's image suddenly overlapped with the impression that Wu Wang gave to Wu Qi. Both of them had a kind of warmth that made Wu Qi feel at ease, safe, and comfortable, like the wings of a mother bird protecting a little bird in a stormy night. Wu Qi felt his eyes turning sour, and 2 drops of tears suddenly rolled down his cheeks. With utmost respect, he dropped to his knees and gave MOD a few kowtows. Jingku gulped down a mouthful of wine from the white jade wine dipper, then turned to MOD and asked, "Teacher, what do you think of this little fellow?" MOD gazed deeply at Wu Qi with his pair of bright eyes, then glanced at the 2 drops of tears rolling down Wu Qi's cheeks. He nodded slowly and said, "He is a good boy. What a pitiful and good boy. Although he is a little cruel and merciless, he still has a pure and innocent heart. He is a good boy that I can rest assured about." MOD stretched his hand out and gently lifted Wu Qi up from the ground. MOD waved his hand and said with a smile, Come sit beside me." Wu Qi wiped away his tears, walked to MOD with a solemn expression, and sat down on the empty ground beside him. Jingku seemed to be satisfied with MOD's answer. When MOD said that Wu Qi was a good boy, the cold, murderous intent in his eyes had vanished without a trace, and was replaced by a gentle look. He gave Wu Qi a gentle look. It seemed like he had put down some thoughts in his mind. He grabbed the white jade wine dipper and poured a few cups of wine into the wine vat, then gulped them down happily. After that, he let out a loud burp. MOD sat quietly on the ground, with 3 pitch-black stone tablets hovering quietly in the air in front of him. He was performing some incantation gestures with both hands, and a ball of purple flame was burning ragingly in the air, crazily burning the 3 stone tablets. Dazzling golden gleams and purple mists kept bursting out from the stone tablets, and countless runes could be vaguely seen on them. From time to time, deep, muffled thunderclaps could be heard, shaking the entire pagoda. Wu Qi recognized the origin of this purple flame. It was the acquired purple flame of Swan Ni, purified from the primordial poisonous flame from the earth core that had existed for millions of years. It had the magical power to break all kinds of restrictive spells, and was the best choice for cultivators below the realm of heaven immortal to forcibly break all kinds of formations and restrictive spells. For example, if one found a box containing some treasures, but it was sealed with several dozens of restrictive spells, and without any spell or incantation gestures, the best and most direct choice was to use the acquired purple flame of Swan Ni to break the restrictive spells with brute force. Judging from the way the 3 stone tablets were burned by the purple flame, the golden gleams and purple mists kept leaking out, and the thunderclaps kept ringing out, It was obvious that more than half of the restrictive spells in the stone tablets had been broken. Wu Qi was very familiar with these 3 stone tablets, as he had been carrying them in the woods of Meng Mountains for nearly a month. They were the stone tablets that Yen Bugue and the others seized from the barbarians. No wonder after they arrived at Ji City, Yen Bugue never mentioned about the 3 stone tablets that Jing Ke had placed a bounty on. Apparently, they had been delivered to MOD, and he was using brute force to break the restrictive spells on them. Wu Qi could not help but feel curious. What exactly was inside these stone tablets? MOD performed a few incantation gestures and released them towards the ball of purple flame. After that, he turned to look at Wu Qi with a smile and said, "I've met many young men. You're a good boy, but you have too many worries in your heart. You need to relax in the future. I heard that your master was attacked and killed in Meng Mountains, and you were saved by someone there. Let bygones be bygones. Young man, you need to look forward. The world is a big place and there are many wonderful things in it. Compared to us, you're still too young. Grudges should never be everything for a young man." MOD's words were not filled with any great principles. He talked leisurely with Wu Qi, just like an uncle from next door. Strangely enough, Wu Qi felt that the stagnant feeling in his heart, as well as the uneasiness and panic he felt after he came to this world, had completely vanished. His heart was filled with peace and tranquility. Just like that, he kept chatting with MOD until the moon hung high up in the sky. 36 consecutive claps of thunder were heard, as the 3 black stone tablets unleashed an endless stream of golden specks that drifted in all directions. Abruptly, the stone tablets broke apart, turning into several thousand jade slips that were as thin as cicadas' wings, 3 feet long and as wide as a thumb, hovering in the air. These jade slips were densely packed with runes the size of soybeans, and each of them was glinting with a magical and magnificent purple glow. MOD looked at these runes, smiled delightfully and said, "All right, Yen Dan's reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives has been completed. Jing Ke, there are 3 chapters of the supreme white sun-piercing dragon technique, which you are cultivating, and you only lack the last chapter. With that, you can complete your cultivation technique. These are the sword techniques of Earth Element, the mountain-crumbling sword technique, and the sky-burning sword technique, which Heaven-breaking sword sect lacks. Wonderful, the inheritance of Heaven-breaking sword sect has been completed." Wu Qi did not pay any attention to the cultivation techniques of the reincarnation technique of 9 deaths and 9 lives and the supreme white sun-piercing dragon technique. Instead, he quickly glanced through the mountain-crumbling sword technique and the sky-burning sword technique, quickly memorizing the cultivation formula. There were 36 diagrams of cultivation routes in both sword techniques, and over 7,000 words of the cultivation formula. With the amazing innate ability of Lu Xiaobai, Wu Qi easily branded the 2 sword techniques deeply into his mind. However, he found it strange that the cultivation technique cultivated by Yen Dan and Jing Ke, as well as the secret cultivation technique of Heaven-breaking sword sect, would appear in the ancestral stone tablets secretly inherited by barbarians? Could it be that they were robbed by the ancestors of those barbarians? There was a great mystery in this matter, and he had to find out more about it. Before Wu Qi could figure out the mystery, MOD's forehead was already covered in cold sweat. He nodded at Wu Qi, smiled and said, "Wu Qi, if you're free, you should come here and take a look. You're a good kid. Jing Ke, bring these back to Ji City, and don't come to me again within 3 months." Jing Ke gave MOD a kowtow, then rolled up his sleeve and kept all the jade slips. After that, he called out to Wu Qi, and both of them quickly left the tower. When they walked out from the tower, Wu Qi turned his head and saw MOD standing on the top floor of the tower, nodding his head and smiling at him. Chapter 130. Taking a deep breath, Jing Ke shook his head and said, "Therefore, the title of Marketing has 2 reasons. Firstly, it's to thank you for enlightening us. Secondly, it's because of Princess Zhonglu. She can't really mix around with an unknown hanger-on. Although we don't take things like status and clans seriously, we are still us. We can't force so many people in Great Yen Dynasty to think the same way as us." A few wild beasts and insects were caught by Jing Ke when they were running a little slower, and were thrown several hundred feet away, smashing into towering trees and making them dizzy, unable to stand up for a long time. Suddenly, Wu Qi realized that no matter it was these wild beasts, including the few great pythons who were about to transform into flood dragons, all of them were despicable wretches. Although they were being bullied by Jing Ku in such a violent manner, they were still bowing and flattering him. Looking at Jing Ku with surprise, Wu Qi knitted his brows and said, "Chief General, I, Wu Qi, have never done anything that goes against the heaven and reason. Is there a need for you to do this?" Wei Xiaoxiao? Jing Ku's face darkened instantly. He sneered and nodded his head. "That little girl? Heh, I don't like her." Wu Qi nodded his head disapprovingly. Jing Ku was in control of Great Yan Dynasty's scouting office, and Lu Qingfeng had suddenly taken over the title of Duke of Yan Luan's Wuguijing. If he didn't carefully investigate the background of Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng, this chief general of Great Yan Dynasty, he would be too incompetent. The measures taken in Little Meng City could fool the numerous secret agents of the Lu Kingdom, but they could never fool the men of Scouting Office. It was reasonable for Jing Ku and his men to know about Wu Qi's art of training soldiers. Seeing Wu Qi nod his head and agree to it, Jing Ku said, "We won't interfere in the matters between you and Princess Zhonglu, including His Majesty. But you have to be careful of the Crown Prince. For the Crown Prince, Princess Zhonglu is not just a daughter." After a long period of silence, Jing Ku said, "Your technique of training soldiers is unique and ingenious. It is much better than the current strategy of Great Yan Dynasty. I suppose that master of yours is also a hermit, but too bad." Shaking his head, Jing Ku said, "You know how to train soldiers, and your skill in training them is so exquisite. This makes you worthy for us to take good care of you." Currently, the young masters and princes of Great Yan Dynasty were good at eating, drinking, playing, killing, visiting prostitutes, and so on. But if you want them to do something serious, there was no hope for them, and they were not reliable at all. Over 2,000 years, Great Yan Dynasty has been founded for over 2,000 years. Wu Qi was silent. He frowned. No wonder Yan Dan was so eager to give the Xiong Qing brothers to him. However, even without Xiong Qing and his brothers, would he, Wu Qi, be so easy to kill? Putting aside the fact that he had already formed the Jin Dan, before he formed the Jin Dan, no earth immortal of nascent soul realm would make a move. As long as he spared no cost and burned his blood essence to escape, no one would be able to stop him. Jing Ke had a strange expression on his face. He pondered for a while, then slowly said, "We've learned about what happened between you and Yan Chengfeng in Little Meng City. You've done a good job. Although your method is still immature and not experienced enough, the result is still satisfactory. Your technique of training soldiers is also very ingenious. I've made a copy of the technique of training soldiers in Little Meng City into a book, and I'm going to give it a try in a few new armies." Jing Ku stared at Wu Qi with a strange expression, nodded his head and said, "According to my temperament, since you've pointed out the biggest obstacle in our hearts, allowing us to make a breakthrough in our cultivation in just a few days, this merit is more than enough to reward you with 3 to 5 vassal kingdoms. But His Majesty is different. He has much more things to consider than me. He can't tell all the ministers and princes of Great Yan Dynasty that because of a single word of advice from you, he has rewarded you with many things." Shaking his head, Jing Ku stared at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "But who asked you to have an intimate relationship with that little girl Zhongli? Tuoba Qingye, Tuoba Haofeng, and those young masters and princes, although they were close to Zhonglu in the past, in essence, Zhonglu is a Wanfeng that can fly up to the 9th heaven, while these young fellows are just a bunch of maggots on the ground. Although they are self-righteous, Zhonglu will never take a liking to this group of prodigal sons. Therefore, some people don't have to worry." Looking at the hesitation and puzzlement on Wu Qi's face, Jing Ku sneered and said, "Apart from protecting you, I gave Xiong Qing and his men to you because I was afraid that those men who killed Yan Buji would strike Yan Chengfeng again. If they dare to strike again with Xiong Qing and his men by your side, they would be walking right into a trap. In the end, before all our precautions could come into play, you had already turned Sher Martial Club upside down, and even managed to catch the murderer who tried to assassinate Yan Buji." Ugh! With a subtle look, Wu Qi turned to look at Jing Ku. It seemed like his words had another meaning. He grabbed a huge wild boar that measured 26 feet and 7 feet long, then threw it nearly 1,000 feet away. With an indifferent expression, Jingku said, "Teacher has spoiled this group of wild beasts, making them only know how to fool around in the woods. You must be wondering why I specifically asked someone to come here this time." Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath and cried out in shock. That man is the personal guard of Wei Xiaoxiao from Wei Merchant. Could it be that the power of Wei Merchant has infiltrated into the court of justice and criminal and scouting office? Indeed, money can make the world go round. Although Wu Qi's expression was one of extreme shock, he was laughing wildly in his mind. Who told you that Wei Xiaoxiao is so arrogant and domineering? Today, I'll make you suffer a heavy punishment even if you don't die. Sighing lightly, Jingku nodded his head and said, "Teacher has a deep understanding of the human heart and knows the ways of the world. He can easily tell whether a man's heart is good or evil. If he said that you're a good man, then you can't be any bad. If teacher said that you have an evil thought in your heart and are not a righteous man, it would be impossible for you to leave Mo Lin alive." Jingku snorted lightly and continued, "This is also the reason why I gave Xiong Qing and his brothers to you. Zhang Lu is involved in too many things, but she herself has no idea about it. But don't tell me we don't know about it. With your background, and the fact that you don't have any powerful backer, the closer you get to Zhang Lu, the tighter the noose around your neck will be. If you don't take some precautions beforehand, you won't be able to survive for more than 3 months in Ji City." Wu Qi quickly cupped his fist and expressed his gratitude to Jingku, thanking him for his concern and great kindness. At the same time, he was surprised by Jingku's well-informed eyes and ears. After the incident with Shi Martial Club, he immediately rushed back to Zhuguojing Mansion and reported the news to Lu Qingfeng. As a result, he didn't waste much time during the journey. However, right after he had a brief conversation with Lu Qingfeng, the incident with Shi Martial Club happened. Immediately, the men sent by Jingku arrived at Zhuguojing Mansion. The efficiency was simply amazing. Jingku twitched his lips, sneered and said, "What kind of crimes are you talking about? Why would I care about that? Whether you kill someone, set a fire, or even slaughter someone on the streets in Ji City, I don't care about all these trivial things." When Jingku was still a wandering knight, he had done many of these things as well. "I've never taken any of those crimes into my heart." All of a sudden, Jingku snapped at Wu Qi with a stern voice. "So, the incident with Shi Martial Club, was it your intention, or was it just a coincidence?" Jingku's face darkened. Rolling his eyes, he glared at Wu Qi and said, "This great Yan dynasty is built by us, one tile at a time. Don't be so harsh with your words." He paused for a brief moment, then continued with a cold voice, "His Majesty is stabilizing his cultivation base, and Gao Jianli and a few other men are busy with important matters, so they can't be separated from him. I know you're involved in this incident. Since you've sent some men of sacrifice to silence the witness, and you're the one who captured that man alive, there might be someone who wants to kill you. That's why I've sent someone to summon you to Mo Lin today. Firstly, it's to save your little life, and secondly, it's to let teacher know what kind of person you are." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment. Apart from the incident with Shi Martial Club, there was nothing else that he had stirred up today. While Wu Qi was immersed in various thoughts, Jingku continued speaking in a slow voice. "You have to be extra careful when you go out these few days. Ask Xiong Qing and the others to follow you closely. If you meet the guard who was silenced, be careful that someone might kill you to vent their anger." Jingku raised his head up and looked at the bright moon in the sky, then said with a low voice, "Teacher is a scholar who possesses a bright Tao heart and has reached the realm of deity. Unlike us, teacher has a heart that is open and frank, like a clear mirror and glazed glass, without any worries or worries. Therefore, 1,500 years ago, he had already formed his nascent soul, and now his cultivation base has reached the acme of perfection. Perhaps it won't take him too many years to form his nascent soul and become a deity, truly living a long and unfettered life." After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi shook his head and did not say anything. Wu Qi understood what Jingku was trying to say. Those who occupy a high position will have different thoughts and thoughts from ordinary people. I can understand why all of you are doing this. Twitching his lips, Jingke pulled out a 3 feet tall yellow wine gourd out of nowhere, opened the stopper and gulped down 2 mouthfuls of the fine wine. He breathed out a breath that reeked of wine, threw his head back, laughed and said, "Prince Dan, that is His Majesty." He knew that Zhonglu has been very close to you these days, and the closeness is very different from the closeness he had with those young masters and princes. Therefore, His Majesty found an excuse and conferred you the title of Marquis. Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "It has been over 2,000 years, and it's time for everything to rot." Hastily, Wu Qi shut his mouth. Only then did Jingke continue, "Because he has been paying so much attention to you, that's why all these things happened. Today, I wanted to let teacher know what kind of person you are, and it was just a precautionary measure. Now that you are a good man, we can put our minds at ease. Since you are harboring evil intentions, we'll kill you as soon as possible, and that will put our minds at ease. The commotion you've caused today is a little too big." The moon hung high up in the sky, and countless fireflies were flying and dancing in the dark forest. Amidst the watery moonlight, the fireflies were dancing in the air, making the scene look like a dreamy land. A faint watery mist was shuttling back and forth in the forest. Apart from the sound of wind blowing through the dense forest, no other sound could be heard. It was different from when Wu Qi came here. When he came here, those ferocious beasts and gigantic insects were blocking his way complacently, making him look bad. But when he returned to the city, those big fellows would turn and run away as fast as they could whenever they saw Jingke. Jingke breathed out a long sigh, sneered and said, "What exactly is the identity of the man you personally captured?" He actually killed several dozens of men from criminal and justice court and scouting office on the spot to silence him. After a careful analysis, we found out that the main target they wanted to silence was the man you killed. Jingke told Wu Qi everything that happened in Sher Martial Club in full detail. The main point was that all those men of sacrifice were from criminal and justice court and scouting office, and not some outsiders in disguise. When Jingke asked the question, a thread of evil force that could shake one's heart and soul burst out from his body. Wu Qi felt his spirit was shaken, and he nearly told the truth. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "His Majesty's kindness, Wu Qi understands." But Wu Qi doesn't understand why His Majesty would treat Wu Qi in such a way. Wu Qi didn't believe that he was the kind of man who was loved by everyone. Why would Yen Dan, the mighty emperor of Great Yen Dynasty, suddenly fall in love with him? Was it just because of the relationship between Princess Zhonglu? For the emperor, no matter how much a princess favored someone, there was no reason for her to send so many demon Jin Dan bears as his personal guards to Wu Qi. Wu Qi nodded his head. He knew what Jingke was trying to say. Is His Majesty thinking that if Wu Qi were to hang out with Princess Zhonglu, and he was just a hanger-on of Duke Yenlu, it would be bad for his reputation? Therefore, he conferred the title of Marquis to Wu Qi? Chapter 131. Jingke's loud shout contained a very strange ripple of energy, which vaguely carried the shadow of the mystifying technique from the Fiend Dao. While Wu Qi was pondering over what Jingke had told him just now, the sudden shout from Jingke had caused his soul to tremble, and nearly told him everything he had seen and heard in Prince Ren's mansion. However, he had made some achievements in cultivating the source of Earth Chapter, Wood Chapter, and Fire Chapter. Ever since he started cultivating these 3 cultivation techniques, in his spiritual sea, apart from the 10,000 zhang water ripples he had obtained from cultivating the Water Chapter, there was also a dense earth qi, a dense forest, and a 10,000 zhang sea of flames that appeared out of nowhere. Above this earth energy, jungle, flame ocean and water ripple was the divine flame of order, which was imprisoned by many restrictive talismans. Currently, Wu Qi could not absorb the divine flame of order and make it his own, but it was, after all, one of the few divine flames in the universe. Right after Jingke's shout, which carried the shadow of the Fiend Dao, touched Wu Qi's soul, the divine flame of order immediately unleashed a large sheet of green-purple light, easily dispelling Jingke's devilish voice and stabilizing Wu Qi's soul. The energies of earth energy, jungle, flame ocean and water ripple rolled and rocked violently, transforming into a four-colored whirlpool in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, firmly protecting his soul in its core. With just a slight tremble of his soul, Wu Qi's mind was completely sober. However, he still put on an expression as if his soul had flown out of his body, staring blankly at Jingku. Countless thoughts flashed across his mind. Should he tell Jingku about Lao AI or not? If he told him, perhaps he would immediately suffer the counterattack from the forces of Prince Ren's mansion. If he didn't tell him, would he just watch Lao AI, a peerless evil man, hide in Prince Ren's mansion? Because of the relationship with Princess Yingchuan, Lao AI had already noticed Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng. Who knew what he would do behind their backs? Compared to Lao AI, who had a bad reputation, the reputation of Jingku, Gao Jianli, and Yen Dan seemed to be much better. At least, until now, they still treated Wu Qi and his companions kindly, without any malicious intent. So what if Prince Ren's residents retaliated? When Wu Qi thought of the large amount of spatial breaching spirit gold he obtained from Sher Martial Club, he was immediately filled with endless confidence. Give him some time, and he won't be afraid of anyone. As long as Wu Qi used these spatial breaching spirit gold to set up a few escape routes, he would not have to fear anyone in this world anymore. In just a blink of an eye, with a dull expression on his face, Wu Qi confessed to Jingku what he had seen and heard in the mansion of Prince Ren. He even took the initiative to admit to Jingku that he had a very high talent in the art of formations. Since Lu Qingfeng obtained the script of Heaven Patching Formation from Heaven Breaking Swordsmanship sect, he had studied it with Lu Qingfeng for a period of time, and the result was that he had learned a lot from it. That was how he bypassed the defensive formation in the Prince Ren's mansion. When he suddenly heard the two words Swanni, Jingku's body shuddered, and he almost leaped up from his mount. He fixed his eyes on Wu Qi and snapped, "Are you sure you heard it right? Was it really Jinjin? Did he really use that guy to carry a wool made of pure gold and spin it around? Prince Ren, Yen Xianxian, is actually his disciple? And Princess Yingchuan has an affair with him as well? It's because you don't want to owe Princess Yingchuan a favor, that's why you attacked Sher Martial Club in advance?" Wu Qi nodded his head blankly and said, "My young master's mother clan wants to divide a territory in the Lu Kingdom. If we end up owing Princess Yingchuan a favor, it will not be a good thing." After a brief pause, Wu Qi confessed to Jingku in a very honest manner, "I didn't know it before, but now." Wu Qi suddenly realized that if one wants to cultivate, he can't do it without money. A lower-grade magical item with the lowest quality would cost 100 gold coins, middle-grade magical item would cost several thousand gold coins, and upper-grade magical item could easily cost 100,000 gold coins. All kinds of talismans are even more expensive. Without money, how can one achieve success in cultivating? Forming my Jin Dan nascent soul, becoming a witness immortal and earth immortal, Wu Qi also wants to live a free and unfettered life. Breathing out a long sigh, Wu Qi said, without any reservation, "For the sake of cultivating, Little Meng City is my young master's private territory." Not to mention the fact that the annual production of Little Meng City is only enough for Wu Qi and my young master. Only Wu Qi and my young master can satisfy our needs. However, if we want to live in Ji City, we need to keep a great number of mighty guards in our mansion, and all of that will cost us money. Therefore, we're planning to cultivate the Tai clan of Mark Yuanyang, allowing him to establish a kingdom of his own. With the production of a kingdom as our backing, together with the production of 2 provinces owned by my young master, it will be barely enough. Breathing out a long sigh, Wu Qi shook his head and said, "The 9th clan has a large number of people, but the only useful ones are Yen Jiuhui and Yen Bugui, with only a few hundred of them. The rest are just a bunch of idiots who only know how to eat and drink. In order to keep so many members of the imperial clan, they have spent more than half of the production of 2 provinces. If we don't find another source of income, how are we going to establish a foothold in Ji City?" Jingku gave Wu Qi a glare grumpily, reached out his hand and lightly patted on Wu Qi's chin, then cried out in a low voice, "Enough! Wake up now! How dare you, little brat? How dare you hide such an important matter from me? In order to not owe anyone a favor, you've created such a big mess. That's Lao AI. While Jing Ku was cursing, Wu suddenly woke up. With a terrified expression, he stared at Jing Ku and asked, "Chief General, what happened to me just now?" Jing Ku rolled his eyes, stared at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "You were possessed by a ghost just now. You've done a great service this time, but you don't need to know why it's a great service. Lao AI, you fake eunuch, don't tell me you've been hiding in Great Yen for so many years? Damn you, why didn't we find you? Why didn't you argue with that godson of yours? Why are you hiding in Great Yen Dynasty?" Laughing dryly, Wu Qi carefully asked, "Chief General, that Lao AI, who exactly is he?" Jing Ku's face twitched a few times. Frowning, he waved his hand forcefully and said, "You don't have to know who he is. It's a very complicated matter. If I have to explain it from 2,000 years ago, it won't be clear in a short period of time. In short, you have to avoid Prince Ren's mansion for the next few days. Don't offend Prince Ren's mansion and the people around him. As for the incident of Shi Martial Club, we'll use the excuse you made up. Tell them that Yen Qingfeng has taken a fancy to Shi Martial Club and purposely tried to seize its foundation." Jing Ku sneered, shook his head and said, "This is a little unpleasant to hear. A duke is trying to seize the foundation of a martial club. Hee, but now all the juniors are doing the same thing. It's not a big deal for your Duke Yen Li's mansion to run amok. It doesn't matter if you have a bad reputation. Among all the juniors in Great Yen Dynasty, none of them have a good reputation." Patting hard on Wu Qi's shoulder, Jing Ku said frankly, "Don't blame me for asking you with a devilish technique. Although you, a little boy, don't know about this, it is too important. Hey, Lao AI, what a great Lao AI. Even the scouting office and Gao Jianli swallows couldn't find any clues, but you, Lao AI, have actually found some clues. You are indeed the Marquis of Chang'exin. What a great Marquis of Chang'exin, what a great Lao AI." While sighing with emotions, Jing Ke had brought Wu Qi to the outskirts of Ji City. At the moment, all 4 cities of Ji City were tightly locked, and all the city gates were tightly sealed. However, with Jing Ku's order, all the city gates were opened. From the outermost city gate all the way to the inner city, all the gates along the way were opened one after another. A great number of city guards came out to greet and guard, escorting Wu Qi all the way back to Duke Yen Li's mansion. When the procession stopped outside of Duke Yen Li's mansion, they happened to see 2 small green coaches parked in a small alley opposite the entrance of the mansion. Jing Ke had a pair of sharp eyes, and he saw the 2 coaches. He casually flicked his whip at Wu Qi and murmured under his breath, "Report to me tomorrow. Who would pay a visit to Duke Yen Li's mansion in the middle of the night? Remember my words, be more cautious when you travel these days, and be more cautious when you speak. Don't mention anything about Lao AI to anyone, and no matter what rumors you hear, just pretend you didn't hear anything." Escorted by Jing Ku, the group of city guards walked towards the general's mansion in the inner city. Wu Qi watched the procession disappear after turning a corner, and only then did he hastily walk into Duke Yen Li's mansion. He walked along the tunnel and came to the parlor, which was used by Lu Qingfeng only when he received the honorable guests. He saw Yen Fu, Lao He, and a few others were waiting on the outside with a solemn expression, while serving servants were carrying plates of fruits, tea, and snacks into the parlor. Upon seeing Wu Qi come in, Lao He quickly came up to him with an excited expression. He lowered his voice, and with an unconcealable excitement, he laughed and said, "Mr. Wu Qi, you're finally back. Go in and have a look, an honorable guest has arrived. The benefactor of young master is here. He has just arrived for a while, and young master has just invited him in. This old mister is young master's great benefactor. Mr. Wu Qi, you have to treat him with great care." Lu Qingfeng's great benefactor? Wu Qi was struck dumb. Since when did Lu Qingfeng have any great benefactor? This guy grew up in the Lu family of Liang, and when he reached the age where he should take over part of the family business, and when he was strong enough to pose a threat to the real disciples of the Lu family, Lu Tsuhai, he was kicked away to Little Meng City and left to fend for himself. Who was the benefactor to him? In those years, Lu Qingfeng was just an illegitimate son who was not welcomed by the Lu family. Flicking away the dust from his clothes, Wu Qi put on a smile and strode into the parlor. The parlor was brightly lit, and the supreme-grade wax made from the oil of merman shone brightly. A fragrant aroma came wafting into Wu Qi's face, making his clothes wet by the dew from Mo Lin feel very comfortable. Inside the parlor, Lu Chengfeng was serving tea to an old man with a smile on his face. The old man was sitting on the seat of honor, receiving the tea served by Lu Chengfeng with a big smile on his face. At the same time, he kept saying that he didn't dare, grabbed Lu Chengfeng's arm and asked him to sit down. This old man was wearing a long robe made of green silk. His skin was whiter than snow, and his face was as white as silver. His round face looked rich and generous, and the 3 strands of silver beard under his chin exuded a sense of vigor and elegance. This old man didn't wear many ornaments. He only had 2 dragon-shaped jade pendants hanging on his left and right side, and a silver ring on the middle finger of his left hand. On the surface of the ring were 2 masks of the same size, and 2 big twisted mouths were smiling brightly. He was from the Wei family. Obviously, the mask was the emblem of Wei merchant. Wu Qi gave the old man a deep look, cupped his fist and bowed at Lu Chengfeng. "Young master, Wu Qi is back." Lu Chengfeng was delighted. Without hesitation, he turned to Wu Qi and said, "You're back? Quick, come and greet old Mr. Wei. He is the current clan leader of Wei merchant and the grandfather of young Miss Wei Xiaoxiao. The reason why he came here today is to give an explanation to Sher Martial Club. I never expected that old Mr. Wei is the benefactor who gave Chengfeng the mystic technique of cultivation and a large sum of money." Wu Qi was struck dumb. Before Lu Chengfeng went to Little Meng City, he had been studying the Tao of formation. With his cultivation of peak stage Hotian realm, he was able to control a formation constructed by 3 formation pillars. This proved that he had an extraordinary cultivation in the Tao of formation. At that time, Wu Qi found it strange. Perhaps the cultivation technique he was using was a secret technique of Lu family, but the Tao of formation was a technique that only cultivators would know. As a bastard son of Lu family, where did he get it from? Especially the lower-tier magical treasure used by Lu Chengfeng, the little 25th lamp. It was not until after he left Ji City that Wu Qi found out the market price of lower-tier magical treasures from the market of 4 seas. The price of upper-tier magical treasures in the market was over 100,000 gold coins, and the price of lower-tier magical treasures was even more immeasurable. After all, even Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong from Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, who were both human immortals of Jin Dan, had only used lower-tier magical treasures. Wu Qi had long felt that the origin of the little 25th lamp used by Lu Chengfeng was a little strange, and it made him realize that he had such a great benefactor in the past. The so-called large sum of money, how much did this old man of Wei merchant give Lu Chengfeng in those years? With all kinds of thoughts flashing in his mind, Wu Qi took a slow step forward and greeted this old man meticulously. Chapter 132. The old man from Wei clan gave Wu Qi a glance smilingly, then used his right hand to touch his left wrist and took off a bracelet, which was 6 fingers wide and had a purple-blue hue, with a color as deep as a bottomless abyss. He handed the bracelet over to Wu Qi, smiled and said, "You are also a young hero. I heard that little friend Wu Qi has joined Heaven-Breaking Sword sect. Since you are a cultivator, this storage bracelet is more useful in the hands of little friend Wu Qi than in mine." Wu Qi stared at the bracelet that was placed 3 feet in front of him. The bracelet was glinting brilliantly, and countless starlight could be seen swirling on its deep surface. Clouds and wind could be seen flying at top speed. In the depths of the bracelet, there were some indistinct red blood threads that formed a series of magical runes. Wu Qi could recognize these runes. They were all mentioned in Scroll of Stealing, the Sumerer mustered immortal talismans that could only be found in upper-grade magical storage items. Looking at the smiling expression on the old man's face, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and said, "Wu Qi dares not accept this gift. I dare not accept it." The old man stared at Wu Qi with surprise. He shook his head and said, "Little friend Wu Qi, haven't you heard of the saying that one dares not reject a gift from an elder? When I first saw you, little friend Wu Qi, I found you to be a man I like. Therefore, I'm just giving you a small gift as a meeting gift. What is there to be ashamed of?" Wei clan has been operating in Great Yan Dynasty for a long time, and this is just a storage magical item. It's nothing to me. Lu Chengfeng looked at Wu Qi, smiled and said, Wu Qi, since it is old Mr. Wei's kind intention, just accept it. Old Mr. Wei has done me a great favor, and he is truly my benefactor, as well as our elder. This is just a storage magical item. Just accept it. Wu Qi shook his head, bowed respectfully to the old man, and slowly took 3 steps back. He stared at the old man and said in an indifferent tone, the reason why Wu Qi refuses to accept old Mr.'s gift is not only because I feel ashamed of it, but also because I don't want to owe old Mr. a favor. For someone like you, it is too difficult to return a favor. Lu Chengfeng's expression changed slightly, while the old man straightened his back and looked at Wu Qi with an interested expression. Why do you say that? Wu Qi gave the old man a deep look, smiled and said, May I ask old Mr., what is the purpose of your visit? Is it just to reminisce with our young master? If old Mr. wants to reminisce about the old days, as our young master has been staying in G City for quite some time, you should have come to visit him earlier, don't you think so? Lu Chengfeng sat down slowly on the seat, looking at the old man with a smile on his face. The old man sighed lightly. He weighed the storage bracelet in his hand, shook his head and said, What a cunning lad. I've been a merchant all my life, and this is the first time in my life that I failed to deliver a treasure to someone. TSK, you're giving a treasure to someone, but you're actually not willing to accept it. You brat, you brat. The old man looked at Wu Qi with a slightly disappointed expression, breathed out a long sigh and said, Fortunately, there are very few people like you in the world. Otherwise, my Wei merchant. Ha! He gave 3 loud laughs, then casually threw the bangle out of the parlor. A loud splashing noise was heard, as the bangle was thrown into some stream or river outside the parlor. The old man laughed and said, Forget it. Since you don't like my gift, this bracelet is useless. I can only throw it away. I can only throw it away. Lu Chengfeng cupped his fist, bowed slightly to the old man and said, Wu Qi's words were inappropriate. I hope old Mr. won't take offense. The old man shook his head and said, No, no, how could I blame him? Speaking of which, little friend Wu Qi has hit the nail on the head. Indeed, I'm not here to talk about the old days with Duke Yenlu. The old man put on a solemn expression and said with a deep voice, I'm a merchant, and the duty of a merchant is to hoard and seek great profits. Many years ago, Duke Yenlu was bullied and humiliated by a few brothers from Lu clan of Liang, and he suffered a fate worse than death. I was fortunate enough to witness it, and thus, I gave Duke Yenlu the beginner cultivation technique, the secret of formation, and 1 million gold ingots. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. This old man was really generous. How could he spend so much money on a poor illegitimate son like Lu Chengfeng? The Qi refinement mantra and array formation mysteries were priceless secret manuals, but to be honest, the value of these secret manuals was only the cost of the manual labor and the cost of paper and ink. But 1 million gold ingots, 1 million gold ingots. To spend so much money on an illegitimate son, this old man was not only bold, he was simply insane. Could it be that he already knew the secret that Lu Chengfeng was the illegitimate son of Yan Buji at that time? Or, could it be that he already knew Lu Chengfeng's future achievement at that time? 1 million gold ingots. Without even asking, the origin of that lower-tier magical treasure of Lu Chengfeng, the little lamp of third, could be easily found out. What couldn't one buy with money? No wonder Lu Chengfeng was so poor when he went to Little Mang City. He had simply used all his wealth to buy a lower-tier magical treasure. Once again, Lu Chengfeng cupped his fist and bowed to the old man. He sat up straight, bowed slightly and said, Old Mr.'s kindness is like giving Chengfeng a new life. Chengfeng will never forget it for the rest of his life. Straightening his body, Lu Chengfeng stared at the old man and said with a deep voice, No matter what request old Mr. has, as long as Chengfeng can do it, I'll do it without any hesitation. Old Mr., what do you want from me? Just tell me. This guy had sold him out with just a few words. Wu Qi frowned and gave Lu Chengfeng a look, then breathed out a sigh. It was a good thing, as this was the weakness of Lu Chengfeng's character. But at least it was better than those guys who would turn their backs on him. In the future, Wu Qi would devote himself to the path of cultivation. He would need endless money, energy stones, and pills to support his cultivation, and Lu Qingfeng would be his biggest source of income. An affectionate and loyal brother is always better than a heartless and ungrateful partner. Wu Qi breathed out another sigh, then he walked to a table next to Lu Qingfeng and sat down. A few serving ladies walked over quietly and served him tea, fruits, and snacks. Wu Qi picked up the teacup and sniffed the aroma of the tea with an indifferent expression. After that, he took a sip of the tea and put down the teacup, then turned to look at the old man. Quietly, he stared at the old man. He felt that a light was about to burst out from his mind, yet he couldn't grasp it no matter how hard he tried. This was a feeling that came from the strong intuition left to him by Lu Xiaobai, and it had nothing to do with Wu Qi himself. Instinct told Wu Qi that he should be able to guess the identity of this old man. But, no matter how hard he racked his brain, he just couldn't figure out who this old man was. The old man looked at Lu Qingfeng with a satisfied expression. He lightly knocked on the table and said, "Let me put it this way. Many years ago, when I helped Duke Yenlu, it was an investment. An investment needs a return. Now, I need the exclusive management rights of all metal and energy stone mines in Duke Yenli's territory. I'll give you the income that Duke Yenli should have, but all the mines must be monopolized by Wei Merchant." Before Lu Qingfeng could say anything, Wu Qi had already said with an anxious voice, "We can give you the metal mines, but not the energy stone mines. Our young master and Wu Qi have both joined Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, and these energy stone mines are now under the sole management of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect." After a brief moment of pondering, the old man turned to look at Lu Qingfeng. Lu Qingfeng nodded his head and said with a deep voice, "That's right. Currently, all the energy stone mines in Qingfeng's territory are under the management of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, and all the energy stones will belong to Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect for their disciples to use in their cultivation." The old man sighed, shook his head and said, "I'm a little late. Competing with Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect? I'm not that crazy." "Well, forget about the energy stone mines, but those metal mines will be under the sole management of Wei Merchant. What do you think, Duke Yenlu? Consider it as a return of my favor, Duke Yenlu." Wu Qi praised in his mind. This old man Wei was indeed a great merchant with many years of experience. Just a moment ago he was still talking about the favor, but now he had immediately laid out his price and discussed the deal. Even ghosts knew that if Wei Merchant monopolized all the metal mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory, the profits he could get would be tremendous. This old man's appetite was much bigger than Wei Xiaoxiao's. Wei Xiaoxiao only wanted a few iron mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory, but this old man wanted to swallow all the metal mines in Lu Qingfeng's territory. Staring at the silver-haired and silver-bearded old man, Lu Qingfeng clenched his jaws, nodded his head and said, "Old Mr. Qingfeng is indebted to you. Whatever you want, Qingfeng will agree to. However, there are many mines in Qingfeng's territory, and they are related to the expenditure of several thousand members of the 9th clan of Yen clan." The old man stroked his beard, smiled and said, "Of course. How much is the annual output of all the mines in Duke Yenli's territory? I'll pay Duke Yenlu an extra 30% of the profit, based on the average output of the past 10 years. The old man let out 3 loud laughs, then turned to look at Lu Qingfeng and said, "Now that we've finished talking about the serious matters, I have a small request. Wei Xiaoxiao is my good-for-nothing granddaughter. When I first asked her to take charge of all the affairs of the merchant in Ji City, she had already made a big mistake." The old man sighed lightly, then looked at Lu Qingfeng and said slowly, "I hope Duke Yenlu can forgive Xiaoxiao if she has offended you in any way. Also, the man who was captured in Sher Martial Club is just a guard hired by Xiaoxiao. He has nothing to do with the death of Duke Yenlu, Duke Buji." Lu Qingfeng frowned and didn't say anything. He turned to look at Wu Qi and vaguely, a trace of uneasiness and hesitation could be seen in his eyes. Wu Qi stared at the old man and asked with a deep voice, "The one who killed Xiaoxiao is someone from Wei clan?" The old man answered with a deep voice, "Yes. It was this old man who personally gave the order to kill that guard and destroy his face. If the people of Scouting Office and Swallow were to know that Xiao Xiao's guard appeared in Sher Martial Club and colluded with Sher Tianma to assassinate Duke Buji, our Wei clan would never be able to clear our name. In order to avoid all these troubles, I had no choice but to kill him. I'll get rid of all the suspicion, and only after that will I come here to ask for a favor from Duke Yenlu. Lu Chengfeng pondered for a brief moment, then turned to look at Wu Qi. Sighing lightly, Wu Qi raised his right palm up into the air and said, I swear on the lives and souls of Wu Qi's fellow apprentices, Wu Qi will never reveal anything that happened in Sher Martial Club to anyone. Everything is just a coincidence. As for the guard, it was because he was trying to flee, and Wu Qi wanted to capture him alive to show his might. In short, it is impossible for Miss Wei Xiaoxiao to have any relationship with Sher Martial Club. The old man stared at Wu Qi with surprise and said, This is a strange oath. Little friend Wu Qi's sect? Wu Qi sighed and said, Since young, Wu Qi was brought up by my master. To Wu Qi, my master is like a father or a mother. If Wu Qi does not abide by the oath today, I'll make my master, Wu Qi's master, and all my fellow apprentices have their souls dispersed, never to be reincarnated again. 2 drops of tears gently rolled down from Wu Qi's cheeks. Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai had their souls dispersed, never to be reincarnated again. Hearing such a vicious oath, the old man felt relieved immediately. A sorrowful expression was seen on his face, as he slowly comforted Wu Qi. After a few drops of tears, Wu Qi wiped them dry, smiled and asked the old man, Not only that, what is old mister's name? The old man laughed and said, I'm Wei Sanju, and I call myself Old Man Yangdi. Little friend, you can just call this old man Wei Yangdi. Suddenly, Wei Sanju, Yangdi So, and Wu Qi threw their gazes over at the ring on the old man's finger. Suddenly, a thought exploded in his mind. He could roughly guess the identity of this old man. When Lu Chengfeng was still a young man, he had the courage to invest millions of gold coins. Apart from him, who else could it be? Chapter 133. Because of the presence of Wu Qi, the atmosphere in the parlor had become rather strange. Although Wei Sanju was a shrewd old man with a thick face, he was not used to this awkward atmosphere. After chatting with Lu Chengfeng for a short while, he rose and bid his farewell. Lu Chengfeng dared not to show any neglect. Without hesitation, he summoned Yan Fu, Lao He, and all his family members, lining up and sending him off from Duke Yan Li's mansion. From a small alley on the opposite side of the street, 2 coaches drove out at top speed. Wei Sanju, with a face full of smiles, boarded the coach, poked his head out from the window, and waved his hand at Lu Chengfeng in a friendly manner. He said loudly, Duke Yenlu, please don't send me off too far. If that's the case, I'll send someone to take over after a few days. I hope Duke Yenlu can inform me in advance. Lu Chengfeng bowed deeply, his palms nearly touching the ground. He said passionately, Since old mister has given his order, Chengfeng will obey it. Rest assured, old mister, there will be no mistake in this matter. 2 lanterns hanging on the shaft of both coaches were lit up. The unique badge of Wei merchant with a laughing face looked very eye-catching in the dim light of the night. The coaches left slowly, and a team of patrolling soldiers happened to pass by. When they saw the 2 coaches, they didn't show any reaction and just let them pass by. Curfew had been enforced in G City, and obviously, Wei Sanju's coaches had violated the curfew. However, the badge of Wei merchant had a unique effect, as it could make these soldiers give them a way out. Money makes the world go round. Looking at this, Wu Qi couldn't help but shake his head. Since both the Criminal and Justice Court and Scouting Office had their own spies from Wei merchant, why couldn't the city guards have their own? Perhaps, all the soldiers in the city guards of G City had been fed by Wei merchant. Lu Chengfeng looked at the coach that Wei Sanju had left, took a deep breath and said, He is, after all, my great benefactor. Although there might be some suspicion of demanding a favor, a drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water. I'm not a gentleman, but I can't be an ungrateful villain. Wu Qi, this matter ends here. Glancing at Lu Chengfeng, Wu Qi nodded helplessly. Should I just let this matter go? Lu Chengfeng makes it sound easy. With this old man's background and the fact that he had spent a lot of money to nurture this rare commodity, it wouldn't be so easy for you to end your relationship with him just like that. His surname was Wei, and he used those smiling faces as the insignia of the merchant guild. When the two mouths were placed side by side, not only could they be placed side by side, but they could also be superimposed downwards. That was the character Lu. Yangdi. So what a Yangdi South. A businessman who was born in Yangdi, had the surname Lu, and liked to invest heavily in advance. Who else could it be other than Lu Buwei, who had almost single-handedly established the foundation of the Deqin dynasty? Lao Ai had been hiding in Great Yan dynasty for over 2,000 years. Why couldn't he, Lu Buwei, change his appearance and build his own business in Great Yan dynasty? Judging from what happened in Sher Martial Club, the foundation of Lu Buwei in Great Yan dynasty was not necessarily weaker than Lao Ai's. After staring blankly at Lu Buwei's coach that was disappearing into the distance for a while, Wu Qi spun and returned to Duke Yan Li's mansion. He cried out loudly, Xiaobai, ask a few brothers to help me go to the parlor and fish out the bracelet that old man Wei threw out. Tiske, he was the one who threw away the bracelet, not me, Wu Qi, who accepted his gift. At most, I can be considered as retrieving the trash. I don't owe him a favor. Quick, fish it out now. Listening to Wu Qi's shameless words, Lu Chengfeng and the others had their faces turned black and white. However, Wu Qi didn't care what they were thinking. He asked Meng Xiaobai to bring some men to the few streams and rivers outside the parlor to fish out the bracelet, while he told them that he was going to do some homework for the night, circulating his energy and regulating his breath. After that, he hastily returned to his abode, shut the door tightly, and with a twist of his body, he was shrouded by a thread of earth energy and plunged into the ground. In just a blink of an eye, he had gone a few miles away. Carefully following the direction where Lu Buwei had gone, Wu Qi used the earth element to move for a few miles. Noiselessly, he came to the bottom of Lu Buwei's coach. The speed of the coach was not fast, about the same as an ordinary man walking. Wu Qi came out from the ground with ease, and without making any noise, he stuck himself to the bottom of the coach. Apart from the sound of the wheels rubbing against the ground, the only thing Wu Qi could hear was the footsteps of the soldiers of the city defense army who kept passing by from a distance. The two coaches belonging to Lu Buwei looked ordinary, as they were pieced together with wooden planks and painted with a layer of varnish. However, when Wu Qi touched them with his palm, he immediately recognized that they were made of a rare acquired spirit item, the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys. Not only was this acquired spirit wood flexible and strong, it could even withstand the attacks from magical items that were lower than mid-tier magical treasures, and it was an expert in isolating sound and divine sense. No one below the realm of heaven immortal could use their divine sense to penetrate the barrier of the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys, and there was no way they could eavesdrop on the voices of the people inside. Twitching his lips, Wu Qi shook his head. He felt lucky that he had found an innate spirit item with wood element beforehand, and was able to cultivate the source of wood chapter. A thread of innate wood element energy, which brought with it a vigorous life force, came out from his palm and quietly fused into the coach made from the sound-canceling wood of innumerable valleys. In an instant, it transformed into a large net and enveloped the entire coach. It was as if the sound-isolating tree of myriad valleys was cheering and welcoming Wu Qi's innate energy. Wherever Wu Qi's innate energy passed through, the tree would adjust its internal structure cooperatively. The coach, which could isolate all sound and divine sense, immediately turned into a funnel. Immediately, Wu Qi could clearly hear the conversation between Lu Buwei and another young man in the coach, and his divine sense had also sensed the existence of both men. Lu Buwei breathed out a heavy sigh, shook his head and said, "In Great Yan, Xiao Xiao is still too young and inexperienced, and he can't take charge on his own. Long Feng, in the future, you will have to help Xiao Xiao in his work." It was supposed to be a simple matter, but he had to make it so tense, and even drew out Nye Baihong from Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect. This is not worth it. When doing business, harmony brings wealth. Why is there a need to fight and kill? Sighing lightly, Lu Buwei continued in an indifferent tone, "At least, Before we can mine enough spatial breaching spirit gold and build the universal teleportation formations that can be found everywhere under the heaven, it is not a good idea to start a war. Only a few of you juniors are capable, and you will have to stay in different dynasties. Patriarch is made of iron. How many nails can he hit? The coach fell into a moment of silence. Then the young man, Wei Longfeng, said with a deep voice, "Rest assured, Patriarch. I will do my best to help Xiao Xiao, and I will try my best to prevent her from doing anything too outrageous. But Xiao Xiao is Patriarch's granddaughter. How can I restrain her?" Lu Buwei threw out a pale golden medallion and said coolly, "Take this medallion. When she goes too far, take it out to deter her." Nye Baihong has forced her to swear an oath on her prime divine soul, forbidding her from tangling with Duke Yen Li's mansion. In order to avoid the oath, she actually used the soul replacement puppet, which is the only 13 of us in our clan, to erase her oath. She is simply fooling around. Wei Longfeng remained silent, while Lu Buwei sighed and said, "Soul replacement puppet is a precious treasure, and yet, she actually used it in a dispute because of her personal feelings. Although there is an iron mine in Duke Yen Li's fief that has produced a rare treasure, the spatial breaching spirit gold, it is not worth it to use that soul replacement puppet. I, Patriarch, can solve the problem with just a few words. So, why did she have to make such a fuss?" After a moment of silence, Lu Buwei said with a serious tone, "Yen Dan, Jing Ku, and a few others from Great Yen Dynasty are easy to deal with, but Wei Wuji, Tian Wen, Zhao Sheng, Huang Xie, and a few others are people who will devour us without spitting out the bones. If Patriarch is not roaming around, our clan would have long been devoured by them." With a solemn expression, Wei Longfeng stared at Lu Buwei and kept nodding his head. Lu Buwei breathed out a long sigh, shook his head and said, "Patriarch can travel millions of miles with the great transporting technique of 5 ghosts. But this mystic technique can only be used once every 6 months. The reason why I came to Great Yen this time is for that spatial breaching spirit gold. I'm afraid the next time I come here will be a few years later. It seems like Great Wei and Great Zhao have discovered each other's existence, and they are now preparing for a great war. In the next few years, Patriarch will be guarding that place, and I'll take care of things amidst the chaos. So, Longfeng, you have to be cautious in the affairs of Great Yen Dynasty." With utmost reverence, Wei Longfeng knelt in the coach and gave Lu Buwei 2 kowtows. Lu Buwei nodded his head, sighed and said, "It's a pity that you're not from the lineage clan. The rules of the clan are set by me, Patriarch, and I can't break them easily. Compared to Xiao Xiao and the others, you are much smarter and capable. Make some contributions, so that I can make an exception and promote you into the lineage clan during the clan assembly." Wei Longfeng's expression changed, and he gave Lu Buwei a few more kowtows. Lu Buwei smiled, stroked his beard, and accepted the kowtows. He blinked his eyes, pondered quickly for a while, then gave another order: "Put all the spies in Great Yen Dynasty into use, and monitor the movements of Ing Zheng and Baiqi. Since they entered a secluded cultivation in Daqin 30 years ago, Patriarch could no longer sense their aura in Daqin. I have no idea where they have gone to. Perhaps they will come here? No one can say for sure." Once again, Wei Longfeng answered respectfully. Only then did Lu Buwei nod his head, breathed out a long sigh, and carefully advised Wei Longfeng for a while. Suddenly, 5 beams of 5 colors, red, white, green, blue, and black, burst out from his body. 5 little ghosts, who stood only 1 foot and 2 inches tall, leaped out from the 5 beams, each holding a lotus throne glinting with a golden gleam in their hands. Then, they lifted Lu Buwei up. The 5 beams of 5 colors rotated and suddenly tore open a pitch-black hole in the air in the coach. Drenched in sweat, the 5 little ghosts leaped into the hole, and in just a blink of an eye, they brought Lu Buwei and disappeared without a trace. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes as he recognized the origin of this cultivation technique. It was the transporting technique of 5 ghosts, which he found in the scroll of stealing. When cultivated to a higher level, one could transform into the body of a heavenly ghost, allowing one to travel freely in the void without any hindrance. Obviously, Lu Buwei had not cultivated to the highest level, as he still had to rely on the help of the 5 heavenly ghosts he had raised to travel through the void with his fleshly body. Judging from what he said, this old fellow had actually established a base outside of Great Yen Dynasty? Obviously, the contribution of the transporting technique of 5 ghosts could not go unnoticed. While most of the cultivators of Great Yen Dynasty were still confined to the territory of Great Yen Dynasty, Lu Buwei had already begun to travel around the world. Fortunately, his cultivation base was not profound, and he could only travel a super long distance once every half a year. Lu Buwei, a formidable enemy. Suddenly, Wu Qi had a feeling. This old fellow had cast a net that had completely covered the entire Great Yen Dynasty. Perhaps, the death of Yen Buji must have something to do with Wei Merchant. What Lu Buwei wanted was not those few iron ores, but the spatial breaching spirit gold that had mutated underneath 2 iron ores. This could explain where the spatial breaching spirit gold found in the secret chamber of Shi Martial Club came from. Presumably, it was a secret stash that Shi Tianma had secretly collected when he was helping Wei Xiaoxiao. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi quietly pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf, thrusting it through the bottom of the coach and piercing deep into Wei Longfeng's body. It went straight through his Dan Tian and sliced his Jin Dan into pieces. Not even in his wildest dream did Wei Longfeng expect that he would be attacked here. Before he could react, his Jin Dan was shattered by Wu Qi's sword, and his blood essence and aura began to rush into Wu Qi's body like a raging river. As he was cultivating with a fire element cultivation technique, he was a human immortal of early-stage Jin Dan realm. As the raging fire element energy kept rushing into Wu Qi's fire meridians, in just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, all his spirit, energy, and soul were completely absorbed by Wu Qi. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi's eyes shone with a faint flame as he plunged back into the ground. After that, he casually threw out a thread of divine flame of order and smashed it onto the coach. The purple-green flame spread and quickly enveloped the entire coach. In just a blink of an eye, the coach was burned into ashes. Chapter 134. Early in the morning, Wu Qi, whose cultivation of the source of fire chapter had advanced to the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, left his room feeling refreshed. The bracelet which Lu Buwei had abandoned was now lying quietly in his left sleeve. After all, he had rejected the gift given to him last night. Although Lu Buwei had abandoned it, and Wu Qi took it out with the thought of recycling it, it did not look good. Therefore, he did not wear it on his wrist openly, but hid it in his sleeve. After all, it was a gift given by Lu Buwei, the treacherous hero of this generation. There were 7 layers of storage space in the bracelet, and each of them was twice as big as the storage ring given to Wu Qi by Princess Zhang Le. In each of the 7 layers of storage space, there was a flying sword of upper-tier magical item level, which contained 7 different energies: gold, wood, water, fire, earth, ice, and thunder. For the cultivators of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, no matter which sword technique they were cultivating, they could always use a flying sword with 7 different energies. Apart from the 7 flying swords, there were also a gold mountain, a silver mountain, a copper mountain, an iron mountain, an emerald mountain, a white jade mountain, and a crystal mountain inside the bracelet. The value of gold and silver was over 10 million taels of silver, and the weight of copper and iron was at least 4 to 5 million kilograms. There were emerald, white jade, crystal, and many other precious stones, and the amount of each pile was over 100,000. It was indeed a great merchant that had branches in all the kingdoms. With such a generous gift, it was more than enough to befriend Wu Qi, a mere marquis of Tianyun of Great Yen Dynasty, who did not have any background. If Lu Buwei had not met Wu Qi, the freak, with such a generous gift, he would definitely be able to win over a man who might be useful to him in the future. Too bad, I'm not Lu Qingfeng and the others. After killing the elite members of the old man's clan, I can burn the corpses and erase all the evidence, and then I can use the huge wealth given by the old man to buy some stuff in the market. Why does it feel so good? Riding on the back of the single-horned deer, Wu Qi shook his head and hummed a little tune as he arrived at the market of 4 seas alone. After asking a few brokers who were loitering at the entrance of the market, Wu Qi found Fairsky, who had helped him buy the mermaid oil last time. Fairsky, who was running towards the entrance of the market, saw Wu Qi from afar, and his face was full of smiles. From afar, he hurriedly shouted, "Marty, you came to the market of 4 Cs to choose treasures again? Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you, Marty." Wu Qi cast a glance at Fairski with a smile. Then he jumped down from his mount and threw a long list to Fairski. "Cut the crap. You'll get your share." Looking at the items on this list, he should be able to gather them in the market of the 4 Cs. It was just that the quantity was a little more, but it wasn't rare. "Help me prepare well. We must collect everything by today." Fairski hurriedly took over the list and quickly glanced at the dozens of materials written down by Wu Qi. They were all kinds of materials, such as 100-tempered iron essence, 100-year dark iron, 1,000-year cold iron, 1,000-year lava iron essence, and so on. All of them were made of various kinds of metals. Each of them weighed at least several million kilograms. Although the quantity was huge, it was not rare at all. Wu Qi proudly patted his left sleeve like a nouveau riche. He laughed out loud and said, "Prepare as soon as possible. We must deliver the goods by today. Don't give me, don't save money for me. Haha, I nearly forgot that I'm also a nobleman. I've made a fortune in the past couple of days. You only need to send these goods to me. Apart from the quantity listed on the list, it'll be best if you have more." Fairski smiled so widely that his eyes had narrowed into 2 lines. He hurriedly led Wu Qi into the market of 4 Cs and sat down in the same tea house as last time. After that, he hastily ran out of the tea house to help Wu Qi prepare the goods. He ran so fast that his feet almost touched the back of his head. The merchants in the market of 4 Cs loved to do business like Wu Qi's the most. Materials such as 100-tempered iron essence and 100-year dark iron were precious, but not rare. If the quantity was large enough, the profit would be astonishingly high. Last time, the materials such as mermaid oil that Wu Qi bought were extremely expensive and rare. Although they were all extremely expensive, because of the small quantity, the profit was not as good as selling a large quantity of these materials that were not so rare. This time, Wu Qi had listed out the quantity of 100-tempered iron essence and other materials that he wanted to buy, and he had even said that the more, the better. Therefore, this business was definitely going to be successful. Throwing the storage bracelet on the table, Wu Qi sat by the table, sipping his fragrant tea in a leisurely manner while looking at the merchants and customers coming and going on the street through the window. Occasionally, some merchants would send some rare and exotic goods. Putting aside those non-living objects, those rare birds and beasts were an eye-opener for Wu Qi. This world was extremely rich in species, and strange things were emerging in an endless stream. The tea lasted for the whole morning, and then half of the afternoon had passed. When the sun was about to set in the west, Fairski, who was covered in sweat, finally rushed back. Behind him were a dozen other merchants, who were also sweating profusely. They walked into the tea house silently with a big smile on their faces, then placed the storage rings on their fingers in front of Wu Qi. After scanning through these storage rings with his divine sense, Wu Qi nodded satisfactorily. The quantity of various goods had far exceeded Wu Qi's demand, nearly 10 times more than what he needed. He transferred all the goods from these storage rings into this storage bracelet with a huge capacity, then asked Fairski for the total price, and paid for all the goods with real gold and silver without bargaining. Weighing the bracelet in his hand, Wu Qi smiled indifferently and said, "It seems the quantity of 100-tempered iron essence and a few other materials is a little less?" Fairski's face, which looked like a blooming chrysanthemum, suddenly turned gloomy. Frowning, he looked at Wu Qi, breathed out a long sigh and said, "Materials like 100-tempered iron essence and other materials are controlled by Great Yan Dynasty, used to smelt all kinds of armors and weapons. More than half of this business is controlled by Wei Merchant, and we can't find too many of them in the market of 4 Cs. But when dealing with Wei Merchant, Miss Wei Xiaoxiao, it's really not easy to talk to her now." Great Yan Dynasty had implemented a special control on materials like 100-tempered iron essence, but those materials like 1,000-years-old lava iron that ordinary people couldn't use, and could only be used by cultivators, were not restricted. Therefore, The quantity of 100-tempered iron essence put together by these dozens of merchants was only slightly more than 50,000 kilograms more than what Wu Qi requested. Unlike those other cultivation materials, the quantity of each of them had skyrocketed. Wu Qi nodded his head, smiled and said, "I understand. You've done a good job. In the future, if I need anything, I'll still look for you." He paused for a brief moment, then Wu Qi pulled out an identity token and threw it over to Fersky, saying, "Help me keep an eye on this place. In the future, if there are any good materials that can be used by cultivators in the market of 4 Cs, or something that belongs to 5 elements, or something that you can't identify, just go straight to Duke Yenli's mansion and look for me." Fersky's face blushed with excitement. He hastily took over the identity token and couldn't even say a word. With this identity token, he could be considered as the personal manager of Marquis Tianyan, and his status in the market of 4 Cs would definitely rise to a higher level. Not only Marquis Tianyun, he had also formed a relationship with Duke Yenli's mansion. In the future, his meteoric rise was just around the corner. Bringing with him a bracelet filled with various metal materials, Wu Qi quickly left the market of 4 Cs, riding his mount and heading towards Mount White Sunday. Stroking the storage bracelet, which had a smooth surface and felt cold to the touch, Wu Qi's heart was filled with endless joy. With these metal materials, he could use the mystic technique of scroll of stealing to refine the minor universal alloy. This alloy was the crystallization of several dozens of rare metal materials, and was a material used in crafting upper-grade magical treasures. Of course, the main use of this material was to craft the minor universal teleportation formation, which was the base of short-distance teleportation formations. Together with the spatial breaching spirit gold he obtained last time, and the huge amount of energy stones given to him by Princess Zhonglu, he could easily craft several hundred of these formation discs, constructing a dense network of teleportation formations that belonged solely to him. With these teleportation formations, he could attack and defend whenever he wanted. As long as he could set up some secret caves and hiding places, he would have the confidence to protect himself in this world. No matter if it was Lao Ai, Lu Buwei, the 4 princes of the Warring States period, the first emperor Ing Zheng, or the murderer Wang Baiqi, as long as he had the minor universal teleportation formation, Wu Qi could ignore all of them. Although this teleportation formation was only a teleportation formation within a planet, and the furthest distance of teleportation was 10 million miles, for Wu Qi, it was more than enough. With 10 million kilometers of space to move strategically, who could do anything to him? Throwing his head back and laughing out loud, Wu Qi spurred his mount and sped out of Ji City, rushing towards Mount White Sun at the fastest speed. When he was leaving the city, he could clearly sense a few hostile gazes staring at his back. He had a rough idea of who these people were. What he had done during the past few days had turned the already muddy pond of Ji City into a muddy pit. He had no idea how many people were thinking about him. Among them, the ones who were thinking about him the most were none other than a few people. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi injected the innate wood energy into the single-horned deer's body. The wood energy transformed into wind, and as Wu Qi recited an incantation, a large sheet of green wind suddenly burst out from under the hooves of the deer. Along with a swishing sound, the single-horned elk took less than 1/3 of the usual time to reach Mount White Sunday. Looking back at the pitch-dark Ji City on the horizon, a strange smile emerged on Wu Qi's face. "I don't care what kind of storm you are going to throw at me. Now, all I need is the innate gold energy, and I'll be able to gather all 5 elements. When I've mastered all 5 elements of 7 foundation establishment technique and formed the Golden Dan, my overall strength will be comparable to an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. At that time, I'll deal with you." Leaping off the mount, Wu Qi stamped his feet and murmured under his breath, "Since I'm already here, I might as well live a more exciting life. My exciting life is destined to be paved with the tragedy of many people. Wei Longfeng, you unlucky bastard, you've saved me a lot of time and effort. Speaking of which, it has been a long time since I last saw Qin Shuwen. If only I could steal all of his Golden Dan energy, Pulling the mount and entering Mount White Sun, Wu Qi ignored all the disciples of heaven-breaking sword sect along the way and came to the foot of the main peak of Mount White Sunday. He patted the mounts but and told it to go back to graze on the grass. After that, he tilted his head up and cried out loudly, "Master, Grand Elder, are you there? Disciple Wu Qi is here to see you. I have something good to tell you." A white beam shot down from the top of the cliff, wrapped around Wu Qi, and brought him up to the top of the cliff. At the top of the cliff, Nie Yaonu had transplanted another batch of ancient pine trees from an unknown place and planted them in front of the entrance of sword stems from the mine. A few more stone blocks and a stone table were placed under the pine trees. She and Nie Baihong were sitting next to the stone table. A pot of tea was placed on the table, emitting a sweet aroma. Upon seeing Wu Qi, Nie Baihong frowned and asked, "How is your cultivation of the qi circulating technique of 5 elements? You can't learn the sword techniques of heaven-breaking sword sect without reaching the mastery of Xiantian realm. You've been running around everywhere, and I don't see you doing anything serious." Ignoring Nie Baihong, Wu Qi turned to Nie Yaonu and said smilingly, "Grand Elder, disciple will exchange the sword technique of mountain crumbling and sky burning for the sword technique of azure water, sword technique of green thunder, and sword technique of thunderclap. I also need to borrow a good equipment crafting room, as there are some things that I need to process." Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong sprung to their feet and cried out in surprise, "What? Mountain crumbling and sky burning?" Chapter 135. Without hesitation, Nie Yaonu grabbed Wu Qi and dragged him into the cave abode of sword stems from the mine. Nie Baihong unleashed a few sword beams, hacking and slashing around the main peak for a while. When he found no one was hiding in the vicinity, he hastily plunged into the cave abode. Both mother and son grabbed Wu Qi and sprinted all the way into the Peerless Sword Formation Pavilion. Nie Yaonu forcefully pressed Wu Qi onto a hassock, then glared at Wu Qi with bloodshot eyes and shouted, "What did you say? The sword technique of mountain crumbling and sky burning? How did you know about these 2 sword techniques? Where did you get them?" On the other side, Nie Baihong directly shot out wisps of sharp energy from his eyes, pressing down on Wu Qi as he said, "These 2 sword techniques are the 2 missing parts of heaven-breaking sword sect's 5 elemental sword techniques. Without them, the highest sword intent of heaven-breaking sword sect, the unity of sword energy script, would never be able to attain the mastery level. Although Mother has managed to complete the unity of sword energies script by reversing the cultivation technique of wood, metal, and water sword techniques, it is, after all, not an orthodox technique. Therefore, its power is only about 40% of the true unity of sword energies." Grabbing Wu Qi's shoulder with both hands, Nie Baihong said with a deep voice, "Tell me quickly, where did you learn about the sword technique of mountain crumbling and sky burning? And where did you get them? These 2 sword techniques are extremely important to our sect. You can't make fun of them." Looking at the extremely nervous Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "Didn't Elder Yen tell you about this? I thought he should have told you both long ago. Yesterday, when I was in the Mo forest, I witnessed old Mr. Mod using a clump of purple flame to calcine 3 barbarian stone tablets of inheritance, and from them, I managed to find 4 cultivation techniques. I quickly memorized them." Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong's expressions froze, and they couldn't help but exchange a glance. Wu Qi did not keep them in suspense. Instead, he told Nie Yaonu and her son about how he was summoned by Jing Ku to Mo forest yesterday, met with Mod, and secretly memorized 2 sword techniques. When he was done, he smiled at the 2 of them and said, "Logically speaking, the great general should have sent someone to inform Elder Yen early in the morning after obtaining these 2 sword techniques." Nie Yaonu snorted coldly, staring at the ceiling and didn't say anything for a long while. On the other side, Nie Baihong sneered and said, if he obtained these 2 sword techniques, he would only let his disciples cultivate them. Why would he give them to us? These 2 sword techniques were not of much use to him. They could not increase his magic power or divine abilities at all. But in the hands of Mother and I, we can truly complete the origin of sword chi formula. Mother originally needed 10 years to truly become a nascent soul, but now it may only take a few months. Wu Qi blinked his eyes and said with a smile, "All right, disciple will write down the sword technique and hand it over to master and grand elder. But this is what disciple wants." Nie Yaonu said resolutely, "Except for the origin of sword chi formula, which I can't teach you yet, I can give you the other 3 sword techniques now. You want a crafting room? I happen to have a pretty good crafting room here, and the flame in it is the magma flame from the Earth's core. No matter what you want to craft, this flame will be more than enough." Wu Qi clapped his hands, laughed and said, "Excellent. Grand Elder is indeed generous." Without hesitation, Nie Yaonu took out 3 small booklets, in which were the cultivation techniques of the Azure Water Sword Technique, Green Thunder Sword Technique, and Thunder Lightning Sword Technique. Wu Qi did not waste any time. Nie Yaonu personally carried a writing table to him, while Nie Baihong stood beside her, helping him grind the ink and brush. Wu Qi began to write down the sword techniques of the Mountain Crumbling Sword Technique and the Sky Burning Sword Technique which he had memorized. Then he wrote down all 36 energy circulation diagrams and all the incantations of the cultivation techniques without missing a single word. Whenever Wu Qi finished drawing an energy circulation diagram, Nie Yaonu would quickly snatch it over and give it a careful look. The smile on her face grew brighter and brighter. On the other side, Nie Baihong was nervously telling Wu Qi, "Don't make any mistake, don't make any mistake. If a single meridian goes wrong, my mother will face the risk of suffering from energy deviation." Nie Baihong kept talking and nagging. Normally, he was cold, merciless, and decisive, but today, he was no different than a long-tongued old granny. In the end, even Nie Yaonu could not stand him any longer. She grabbed Nie Baihong and threw him far away. "Shut up. How could an old granny have such an impatient child like you? Get the hell out of here. Search carefully in the sect, and see if that old fool Yenli has obtained the 2 sword techniques." After pondering for a brief moment, Nie Yaonu said coldly, "Yenli has taken in a few new disciples before the new year, and all of them have spirit seed constitutions of earth and fire element. It looks like he has been prepared for this. Find an opportunity and let these few disciples die in an accident. As for the clans behind these few disciples, it's up to you." Wu Qi raised his head and gave Nie Yaonu a look, whose face was filled with a murderous aura, and nodded his head silently. The internal strife of heaven-breaking sword sect had come to this. At the critical moment, Nie Yaonu was much more useful than Nie Baihong. Presumably, these disciples taken in by Yen Li were the geniuses who were the most suitable to cultivate the mountain crumbling and sky burning sword techniques. If Nie Baihong really assassinated these few disciples, Yen Li would have a big headache. After spending half an hour, Wu Qi finally handed over the 2 complete sword techniques to Nie Yaonu. After reading them carefully, Nie Yaonu breathed out a sigh and said, "Finally, I've completed the sword techniques of 5 elements. Now, the other sword techniques derived from them will not be a problem anymore. The Unity of Sword Energies script of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect is finally complete. However, it is a little strange. Why would the sword techniques of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect appear in the territory of barbarians? And why did the ancestors of barbarians fuse them into the stone tablets of inheritance? And why would the scouting office send someone to search the barbarian territory?" Wu Qi was surprised by Nie Yaonu's question as well. He pondered for a while, then vaguely gave her a possible answer. Before Great Yen Dynasty was founded, this place was the territory of the Barbarian Alliance. With the strength of barbarians at that time, it shouldn't be a difficult task for them to break into some immortal's cave and take away some legacy techniques. However, no one knew why the barbarians only took away 2 sword techniques. Nie Yaonu added some explanations to Wu Qi's answer. When she found this immortal's cave, 3 sword techniques were placed in 3 different places, and the places where the mountain crumbling and sky burning sword techniques were supposed to be placed were empty. Presumably, it was because of what Wu Qi said that these 2 sword techniques were taken away by the barbarians. Both of them exchanged a glance, and both felt that this was the only explanation. Since Great Yen Dynasty had wiped out the Barbarian Alliance in the war in those years, they must have some knowledge about the situation of the barbarians. Therefore, they must have some clues about which tribe took away some cultivation techniques. After over 2,000 years of relentless investigation, it was reasonable for them to have some results. However, the fact that the cultivation techniques of Yen Dan Jingku and the others were not complete in the hands of the barbarians had shocked Nyayaunu. Despite cultivating with incomplete cultivation techniques, they were still able to wipe out the barbarian alliance. Was it because the barbarians were too weak, or was it because Yen Dan Jingku and the others were too strong? Shaking their heads, both of them decided not to pursue this question further. Nyayaunu solemnly kept the sword techniques into her storage ring, then brought Wu Qi to the crafting room where he saw her crafting flying swords when he stole the dustless lamp last time. On the floor of the empty crafting room, a large suppressing formation was constructed using various fire-resistant materials. Nearly 1,000 upper-tier earth elemental energy stones, each the size of a human head, were embedded in the formation, firmly suppressing the raging lava flame that was about to burst out from underground. A 30 feet tall, three-legged bronze cauldron was seen hovering in the middle of the formation. All three legs of the cauldron were emitting a pale green glow, and a threatening cold breeze was vaguely spreading out from them. At the center of the formation, there was a roughly 1 foot wide fire hole, weaving into a very large light barrier. Nyayaunu brought Wu Qi to this place, then looked at him suspiciously and said, "With your current cultivation base, the water elemental cultivation technique you cultivated should have become useless. Although you have cultivated the qi circulating technique of 5 elements to Xiantian realm, your cultivation base is still too weak. What are you trying to craft with the flame of earth core?" Wu Qi looked at Nyayaunu smilingly, shook his head and said, "Grand Elder, please activate the formation. I think this bronze cauldron can be used to craft items, right? What I'm trying to craft is not some magical treasures or items, but some materials. Our young master is studying the formation, so he needs to deploy some formation diagrams and foundations." With a wave of his hand, he threw out a mountain of all kinds of refined iron, 100-year dark iron, and other materials from his bracelet. Looking at these materials, Nyayaunu could not help but burst into laughter. She shook her head and said, "After fighting with that old fool Yenli for too long, I've become more and more paranoid. Well, with the cultivation base of a little kid, what else can you craft? These materials, they are actually suitable to be used to construct a low-grade formation diagram." Nyayaunu gave these materials, the highest quality of which could only be used to craft lower-grade magical items, and immediately, she no longer had any doubts. Then she performed a few incantation gestures, activating the formation in the crafting room. Slowly, the green light barrier underneath the three-legged cauldron cracked open, revealing a finger-sized hole. From there, a straight red flame shot out along with an ear-splitting whistling noise. In just a blink of an eye, the entire cauldron turned red. The temperature in the room began to rise, and the surrounding earth elemental energy stones began to flash rapidly. Gradually, a heavy force pressed down from all directions, firmly restraining the scorching heat to a radius of 10 meters around the cauldron. Nyayaunu shook her head disinterestedly, spun and walked out of the room, watching Wu Qi throw all the materials into the cauldron in a strict manner according to a certain ratio. She was in a hurry to figure out the two sword techniques, and did not have the mood to fool around with Wu Qi here. How big of a trouble could a little guy of Xiantian realm cause? Hastily, Wu Qi closed the thick and heavy stone door of the crafting room. He scanned the cauldron with his divine will and sensed the rapid melting of all the materials he threw into it. A complacent smile emerged on his face. The minor change universal alloy was a secret formula recorded in the scroll of stealing, and basically, no one in the world of cultivators knew about it. It was the formula that the mysterious figure who passed the scroll of stealing to Wu Qi had spent a lot of time and effort to research. As a qualified thief, the most important thing was to have a way to escape. Apart from all kinds of escape arts and techniques, what else was the best way to escape other than teleportation formations? Not only the minor universal teleportation formation, even the grand universal teleportation formation, and all kinds of teleportation formations that could teleport across galaxies, were all analyzed and explained in detail in the Scroll of Stealing. However, as of now, Wu Qi did not have any high-quality materials to craft those teleportation formations. Therefore, he could only stare at those crafting methods while drooling. Using his divine will, he carefully controlled the melting rate of all the various molten metals in the cauldron, then began to fuse them according to a unique dimensional crystal structure, turning these ordinary metals into the minor change universal alloy, whose value had increased by thousands of times. With the help of the flame from the Earth's core, the first minor universal teleportation formation was cast by Wu Qi 12 hours later. It was an 8 feet in diameter, 6 inches thick, translucent, pale blue, and had the same color as the sky. As it was formed in one piece, the traces of the formation as well as the inlaid spots of various energy stones were left on its surface. Wiping off the sweat from his forehead, Wu Qi continued his work. A single formation disk was not enough for him to teleport. Chapter 136. Therefore, he could not let Wei Xiaoxiao get her hands on the spatial breaching spirit gold. Either Wu Qi stole all the spatial breaching spirit gold from the mine, or he simply uprooted all the businesses of Lu Buwei in Ji City. If Lao Ai knew that Lu Buwei had also meddled in Ji City, what would his reaction be? His face was filled with uncertainty. While Wu Qi was pondering all sorts of ruthless thoughts, Haoying Fengying's voice suddenly came from the roadside. "Brother Wu, Senior Brother Wu, Marquis Wu, Martin, I've finally found you." With a smile on his face, Wu Qi thanked the young girls who called themselves Qing Yu and Ziyu, then followed them into the treasure-keeping pavilion. There were many items in the treasure-keeping pavilion, but Wu Qi did not have the mood to waste his time here. He picked out a close-fitting defensive robe, a pair of magical cloud boots that could increase the speed of flying by 30%, a heart protection mirror, a 5-beam sword crown, and a pearl that could release the fog. After that, he left the treasure-keeping pavilion. When he thought of the possibility that Lu Buwei, the cunning old fox, would appear in Ji City at any time, and when he thought of the peerless evil man, Lao Ai, living in Ji City, Wu Qi felt a sharp pain in his head. If his cultivation base had already reached the realm of Gold Immortal, he would not have to worry about these things, as he could just strangle these people to death. However, with the current cultivation base of Lu Buwei and Lao Ai, they could easily kill him with just a finger. If he did not plan carefully, it would be impossible for him to succeed. Wu Qi raised his head up and saw Haoying Fengying striding out from a small path in the forest with a big smile on his face. Together with a few young men, they came to greet Wu Qi attentively. With great enthusiasm, Haoying Fengying grabbed both of Wu Qi's hands, laughed out loud and said, "Where is my Marquis Wu? Some time ago, I was told that you've returned to the mountain. I've been waiting here for you, but I never saw you. I don't care about anything else. I've prepared a few jars of good wine here. If you don't finish all of them today, you're not allowed to leave." The single-horned deer, whose belly was round and full, comfortably snorted, then rubbed its big head against Wu Qi's body a few times. Wu Qi did not ride on it. He pulled the reins and slowly brought it towards the gate of Baiyang Mountain. As he walked slowly, he pondered what to do next. Now that he had the minor heavenly cycle teleportation formations array disk, he needed to quickly set up a few escape routes. However, he still had to plan carefully as to how he would act. This was the way of the world. When Haoying Fenglong was out of luck, the market for Haoying Fengying would naturally increase. Hence, Wu Qi needed to befriend him. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi waved his hand and invited a few young men of the Haoying family who were standing behind Haoying Fengying into the pavilion. After that, the group of people sat down, pouring themselves a cup of wine and enjoying themselves. The scenery of the mountain here was quiet and beautiful, with no one to disturb them. The wine was 100-years-old wine, and the fruits and dishes were of the best quality. Drinking and drinking like this was indeed a great pleasure. Immediately, Wu Qi let go of the reins and drove the single-horned elk to the forest beside the road to graze, while he held Haoying Fengying's hand. Both of them walked side by side, laughing and walking towards a small clearing at the end of the shady path. There was a pond with a dark green color, giving off a tranquil atmosphere. The soft grass by the shore was densely covered with colorful flowers. Surrounding them was a dense bamboo forest. The sound of bamboo rustling could be heard when the wind blew. It was an extremely quiet and tranquil place. While Wu Qi sat down and drank a pot of wine, a fist-sized, golden-eyed, black-feathered pigeon flew into a house outside the imperial palace at top speed, leaving a black line behind it. Tuoba Haofeng, who was sitting in the main hall of the house, grabbed the pigeon and pulled out a small piece of paper from the bone ring on its toe. There were no words written on the paper, only the drawing of a small dagger. Both Blue Moon and Ziyu did not have the ability of Nyayaonu using her sword beam to capture someone from a distance. As both of them were in secluded cultivation, Wu Qi had no choice but to slowly climb down the cliff using the green vines. When he was passing through a stretch of ancient pine trees, he was even chased by a few big white cranes, which gave Wu Qi a hard time. Standing on top of the cliff, Blue Moon and Ziyu were watching Wu Qi dodging the attacks of the big white cranes in a flurry, and they couldn't help but burst out laughing. Wu Qi was so angry that his nose twitched. He nearly lost control of himself and unleashed his flying sword to kill these few white cranes. It took him a lot of effort to restrain the anger in his heart. Therefore, he had no choice but to borrow the power of the earth core flame in the immortal's cave of sword stems from the mind. Wu Qi performed an incantation gesture, once again sealing the earth core flame that burst out from the cave. After that, he tidied up all the leftover materials and waste materials that splashed all over the place, and cleaned up the crafting room. After making sure there was no trash left behind, he moved the stone door of the crafting room and strode out. If not because I don't want to expose the fact that I've already formed the Jin Dan, I'll definitely kill all of you with my flying sword. Smilingly looking at these big white cranes, Wu Qi whistled. The single-horned deer he kept at the foot of the cliff responded with a cry from a distance, then leaped and leaped towards Wu Qi. It stuck out its fat tongue and licked Wu Qi's face a few times. Previously in Heaven's Will Palace, when facing the enormous pressure from Qin Shuwen, Haoying Fengying could still stand up for justice and speak up. Therefore, he could be considered as a worthy friend. Haoying Fengying pulled Wu Qi's arm, smiled and said, "I've been waiting here for a few days now. The fruits and dishes are freshly made every day. I hope brother will like them." He pulled Wu Qi's arm and respectfully led him into the pavilion, sitting on the main seat. Patting on the skinny body of the single-horned deer, Wu Qi sighed lovingly and said, "For the past 2 days, you can only eat grass. You've suffered a lot." From his storage ring, Wu Qi took out a bag of high-quality fodder and fed it to the single-horned deer, letting it eat until it was full. Then, Tuoba Haofeng tore the piece of paper in his hand and cried out sternly, "Pass down my order, get ready to strike. Somebody, follow me into the palace. Bring Miss Yu's name card with you." I don't believe that bitch Zhonglu will refuse to accept my invitation when Miss Yu personally invites me. This world was filled with a very strange atmosphere, and Wu Qi did not want to die here without any preparation. He gave this pair of teenage girls, who were obviously twin sisters. Both of them had the cultivation base of physique-strengthening tier of Xiantian realm. Judging from their young age, they must be the trusted disciples of Nyayaonu, who had meticulously trained them. Last time, when Wu Qi came to steal the dustless lamp in the middle of the night, he did not sense the similar aura of these two teenage girls. Apparently, Nyayaonu's trump card was not only this immortal's cave, and she must have other mansions in other places. The sky had just brightened, and the sun had just risen 30 feet into the sky. There was still some fog that had yet to disperse. Crafting the minor universal teleportation formation was a strenuous task. After Wu Qi had familiarized himself with the crafting process, his speed became faster and faster. Finally, 12 days later, he had successfully crafted over 180 formation discs and stored all of them in his storage ring. Apart from these formation discs, he had also crafted several hundreds of formation discs of various sizes, made from ordinary metals, ranging from 1 origin formation to 6 direction formation. He planned to give them to Lu Qingfeng and himself, who could also use them. While shouting and laughing all the way, Wu Qi gave 2 middle fingers to the big white cranes that were flying towards him from the sky. While laughing wildly, he picked up a rock from the ground, casually pinched it into countless pebbles, and threw them towards those big birds. The pebbles pierced through the air and accurately hit on the necks of these big birds. The pain made them scream and soar up into the sky, not daring to come down and fight with Wu Qi again. Between the bamboo forest and the pond, there was a small pavilion, built using the bark of pine and cypress trees that were pulled out from the ground. Currently, there were a few cushions, a few short tables, 10 jars of fine wine, and some delicious fruits and delicacies placed in the pavilion. It was neatly and tidily arranged. After forming the Jin Dan, the cultivator would be able to craft items with the Samadhi true flame. But too bad, the two Jin Dan formed by Wu Qi were innate water elemental. Although they had a mighty power, they could not control the flame. Also, he could not control the divine flame of order freely. Using this innate divine flame, which ranked in the top 5 in the entire universe, to craft a formation disc was really overkill. Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong were nowhere to be seen. Only a pair of teenage girls, clad in a light yellow short skirt and a light green shirt, were waiting outside the door to welcome Wu Qi. Both of them told him with a gentle tone that both Nye Yaonu and Nye Baihong were in a secluded cultivation, trying to comprehend the sword technique. He could leave after he was done with the task, and when Nye Baihong had achieved some success in comprehending the sword technique, she would pay him a visit in G City. A couple dozens of dark shadows flashed across the courtyard at top speed, leaving behind a faint, almost inaudible sound of wind piercing. While dragging Wu Qi and walking towards the small path in the woods, Haoying Fengying said with great hospitality, "I have to thank my brother." Haoying Fenglong was sent to the northernmost region by His Majesty to build a city and establish his business. As his foundation is unstable, he will never be able to return to G City for the rest of his life. Once he left, the power of his branch will be greatly reduced, and my status in Haoying clan has risen rapidly. It is all thanks to my brother. These items were all mid-grade magical items, and could be used by injecting a little bit of divine sense into them. On the spot, Wu Qi changed into a treasured outfit, a pair of cloud boots, and a protective mirror. He hid the pearl under his sleeve, and fastened the sword crown on his head with a ribbon. With his hair that was neither too long nor too short now, the sword crown could barely fit on his head. The sword crown took the shape of 5 dragons circling around the moon, and a cold gleam could be vaguely seen in each of the 5 dragon heads. They were actually 5 tiny flying swords, and as long as the divine sense was activated, they could transform into cold gleams and hurt people. Very soon, the coach was ready. Tuoba Haofeng boarded the coach and brought a large group of guards, heading straight for the imperial palace. When Haoying Fenglong was forced to build a city and establish his own country in the northernmost snowland, Wu Qi smiled. No matter what, Haoying clan was still in charge of the position of criminal and minister, which was the highest position among the 3 prime ministers and 9 ministers of Great Yen dynasty. If he could rope Haoying Fengying to his side and make him his man, at least the incident where he was framed at the city gate would not happen again, and he would have another helper in G City. After putting on a few magical items that he had obtained for free, Wu Qi thanked Blue Moon and Purple Moon, then left the cave under their guidance. Both young ladies also told him that there were 3 treasure chambers in the cave, and many items that could be used by cultivators were kept in those chambers. As for Wu Qi, he was given the credit of learning the sword technique, so he was allowed to pick 5 or less treasures from the treasure chambers and bring them away. As for Wei clan, what Wei merchant wanted was the spatial breaching spirit gold, which was found under the 2 iron ores in Lu Qingfeng's territory. Such a precious treasure could not be left to Wei merchant. The cultivation base of Lu Buwei was at least an earth immortal of nascent soul realm, and because of the limitation of the 5 ghosts transportation technique, he could only travel around the world laboriously. If he could find enough spatial breaching spirit gold with a large enough volume, he could build a super long-distance teleportation formation. With that, he would be able to quickly bring a large number of men and travel around the world. It had been quite some time since Lu Qingfeng became Zhuguijing, and Yen Dan had only given him 1 year to make a contribution. No matter what, Yen Dan had to come up with a good plan for Lu Qingfeng. Whether it was a face-saving project or a political achievement project, In the near future, he had to make Lu Chengfeng gain some fame and reputation as soon as possible. Although he had spared the lives of a few white cranes, Wu Qi did not want to let them have a good time. When he was climbing over those ancient pines, he forcefully kicked a few huge cranes' nests off the branches, falling down into the deep cliff. A large flock of white cranes flapped their wings and flew up into the sky, crying shrilly in panic. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was laughing out loud, climbing all the way to the bottom of the cliff. Blue Moon and Purple Moon's laughter came to an abrupt stop. The sisters stared at Wu Qi, who was as tiny as a sesame seed, and felt a suffocating feeling in their hearts. This man was too unreliable. How could he be so calculative with a bunch of feathered animals? Chapter 137. Deep within the imperial palace of Great Yan Dynasty, in a palace that occupied a vast area, Princess Zhonglu was seen lying on a large bed, lost in thought. Through a few layers of pale green gauze curtains, one could see that the sun was shining brightly outside. Together with some palace maids, Bai Zhuer and Bai Zuer were quietly entering and exiting the room, tidying up all sorts of miscellaneous items. In Princess Zhongli's bedchamber, not to mention the luxurious furnishings, there were 3 huge jade tables carved with floral patterns placed right in the center of the room, which made them extremely eye-catching. On one of the tables were placed several dozens of chessboards made from different materials, but all of them were extremely precious and rare. The chess pieces were made from precious gems, gemstones, pearls, and many other precious materials. Countless chess pieces were piled messily on the chessboard, scattering on the pale green carpet. Together with a few palace maids, Bai Zhuo was quietly picking up these chess pieces, sorting them into different categories and placing them into the chess boxes carved from jade. On the other table, a dozen jade zither were piled up messily. All of these zither were ancient and colorful, and were made from various rare and precious spirit woods and spirit jades. The strings were either made from the tendons of flood dragons, or the threads of 10,000-years-old spirit creatures, or the long threads melted and condensed from spirit jades of water element. All of them were extremely rare items in the world. On the last table, a couple dozens of large drawing papers were spread out, as white as snowflakes. On a few of them, countless characters were written in small characters, all of which were the poem, Lovers from the South and the North, which was plagiarized by Wu Qi. Perhaps he had written the poems several hundred times, over and over again. On the other drawing papers, ink and brush were dripping, messy. No one could tell what was written on them. If Wu Qi were here, he would comment that these words looked like the graffiti of a 3-year-old kid, and did not have the slightest foundation in painting. The tree he drew looked like a featherless chicken claw, and the person he drew looked like a matchstick stuck in dough. The animals he drew looked like they had been washed and stripped clean, and had been stewed in a pot of soup until they became deformed. A few high-quality inkstones were dripping with ink, and dozens of fine brushes made from the fur of demon beasts were randomly thrown onto the jade table. The jade table with a radius of several zhang was in a mess, as if dozens of wild dogs had ravaged it. Meanwhile, Bai Zhuer and Bai Zuer, together with a dozen or so palace maids, began to tidy up all the items in the chamber, restoring them to their original state as quickly as possible. Princess Zhonglu was lying on the bed with her hair disheveled. She tilted her head and watched them work. She swung her bare feet back and forth, her light pink toes picking up the thin blanket from time to time and waving it around. After a long while, when she saw that Bai Zhuer and the others were almost done with their work, Princess Zhonglu yawned lazily and said, Zuer, do you think it's better for me to get up now, or go back to sleep? Clapping her hands, Bai Zhuer came before Princess Zhongli's window, bent over and said with a smile on her face, Princess, you better get up quickly. For the past 2 days, apart from doing your homework at night, you've been sleeping all the time. Even if you've formed the Jin Dan, do you think it's good for your health? Holding her chin with both hands, Princess Zhonglu breathed out a long sigh and said, What should I do if I get up? Grandpa couldn't figure it out this time, so he came out to govern the city. No one in G City dares to cause any trouble, and we can't even watch the show. That little fellow, Wu Qi, has actually gone to Heaven Breaking Sword sect for some unknown reason. I haven't seen him for more than 10 days. Tell me, what could he be doing in heaven-breaking sword sect? He even borrowed Sister Lady Medicine's crafting room to craft something? He better not burn down the immortal's cave of sword stems from the mind. Bai Zhuer smiled. Deftly, she tied up Princess Zhongli's hair into a bun and carefully combed her hair until not a single strand of hair was out of place. It looked like she had gotten used to combing Princess Zhongli's hair when she was still lying on the bed. Although the posture was not right, the quality of the bun was impeccable. While she was busy, she smiled and said, "It's hard to say. Didn't Marquis Wu buy a lot of metals and materials from Market of Four Seas? Perhaps he wants to craft a sword, or perhaps he wants to craft something else. A Taoist of Xiantian realm can also craft something nice." Twitching her lips, Princess Zhongli twisted her body, frowned and said unhappily, "If he wants something, he can just tell me directly. I'll get it from the Imperial Treasury. Why does he have to work so hard himself? Really, he has wasted more than 10 days of time, and he doesn't even know how to spend the time with me?" Bai Zhuer dared not to say anything, but kept busy helping Princess Zhongli to tie up her hair into a bun. Sighing lightly, Princess Zhongli waved her hand casually. Immediately, several dozens of gauze curtains hanging down from the ceiling in the bedchamber flew up and hung on the hooks next to her. One of the walls of the bedchamber slowly opened up, revealing a huge room measuring several hundred feet in both width and length. Neatly arranged sandalwood racks were piled with all kinds of clothes. Tilting her head, Princess Zhongli looked at the room and asked worriedly, "What kind of dress should I wear today?" "No matter how you look at it, I have so many dresses, but I only have 2 or 3. The same color, the same appearance, what a headache." Sighing faintly, Princess Zhongli twitched her mouth and asked in a daze, "What should I eat for breakfast? Still lotus seed cake and 5 meters of porridge? Change to something else? But what should I eat? Strange, why should I eat breakfast now? As a Jin Dan human immortal, I can eat the wind and drink the dew." Her pretty face suddenly turned gloomy. Looking up into the sky, Princess Zhongli breathed out a long sigh and said, "How pitiful, I can't even eat breakfast. Eating the wind and drink the dew, isn't that the same as drinking the northwest wind? Compared to this, it's better to eat breakfast." With a gloomy face, Princess Zhongli tilted her head again, frowned and murmured to herself, "Will Wu Qi go down the mountain today? Not go down the mountain? Go down the mountain? Not go down the mountain? If he still doesn't come out, I'll just rush into the immortal's cave and drag him out. But the sword stems from the mind has a very tight restrictive spell. There's no way I can rush into the immortal's cave. Even Grandpa Emperor can't do it, let alone me. What is Sister Yaonu doing? Why is she in seclusion?" After sighing for a while, Princess Zhongli continued to worry, "If Wu Qi go down the mountain today, what kind of clothes should I wear to meet him? What kind of shoes should I wear? What kind of jewelry should I wear on my head? Does he like delicate jewelry or elegant jewelry? Heavy makeup or light makeup? Light makeup? Heavy makeup makes my face so uncomfortable." A bird cry was heard, and a green bird with a long tail, shaped like a peacock, but only the size of a palm, flew down from the sky at a high speed and crashed into the bedchamber. Seeing Princess Zhongli, the bird flapped its wings happily and flew toward Princess Zhongli. Princess Zhongli was startled at first, then overjoyed. She grabbed the bird with one hand and pulled out a small golden ring from under its wing in an extremely barbaric manner, then took out a small paper scroll from inside. On it was a secret mark of the scouting office, as well as a simple sentence: "Markinian has left the immortal's cave, sword stems from the heart." Great! Princess Zhongli threw the bird in her hand out. The bird was caught unprepared and was smashed onto the table by Princess Zhongli. The poor bird rolled its eyes and fell to the ground, its wings and legs twitching. Princess Zhongli had already jumped off the bed and shouted, "Quick, help me change my clothes and make up. Hurry, go to the city gate and stop Wu Qi. This time, he must accompany me to Zhang Li's garden for a month." Palace maids quickly rushed over and helped Princess Zhongli change her clothes and make up her clothes at the quickest speed. Right after everything was done, Princess Zhang Li held a bowl of porridge in her left hand and took 2 mouthfuls of porridge, while her right hand held 2 snacks and quickly swallowed them. After that, she brought Bai Zhuer and ran out of the palace. 8 ghost immortals, each shrouded in towering energy, and several hundred palace guards quickly followed behind, surrounding Princess Zhang Lu in the middle. Right after the procession walked out of Princess Zhang Li's bedchamber, went around a few palaces, and was about to leave the palace, Tuoba Haofeng had already entered the palace with a few attendants, followed by a few imperial eunuchs, and just happened to bump into Princess Zhang Li's procession. Sitting in the coach, Princess Zhang Li's face darkened when she saw Tuoba Haofeng's smiling face. Without hesitation, she gave out an order, "Somebody, break Tuoba Haofeng's limbs and throw him out of the palace." Do you really think I'm so easy to deceive? That dead bastard Tuoba Qingye is not a good man, and you, Tuoba Haofeng, are not a good man either. Since you purposely came to trouble Wu Qi, you must be a bad man. Somebody, break him, break his limbs and throw him out of the palace. Immediately, over 30 palace guards leaped forward like wolves and tigers, pressing down on Tuoba Haofeng, who dared not to resist, and were about to give him a brutal beating. Tuoba Haofeng, whose heart was filled with hatred, hastily cried out, "Your Highness, Princess Zhang Lu, the purpose of your humble servant's visit is to deliver young Miss Yu's invitation card. Young Miss Yu is holding a poetry and painting meeting on the myriad Red River, and she has invited all the most famous talented men and women in G City. Your humble servant dares not to offend your Highness. Young Miss Yu knows that I can enter the palace to meet your Highness, and that's why she asked me to bring this invitation card to your Highness." Princess Zhang Lu was struck dumb. She frowned and asked, "Poetry and painting meeting? Young Miss Yu Qianqian's poetry and painting meeting? Why didn't I know anything about it?" Tuoba Haofeng let out a few hollow laughs. Carefully, he glanced around at the palace guards who were pressing down on him and a few of his attendants. He snorted coldly, then said with a deep voice, "Release him. Tuoba Haofeng, I'm usually the first one to know about Yu Qianqian's poetry and painting meeting. Why do you need to deliver the invitation card this time?" Carefully, Tuoba Haofeng handed over a light green name card to one of the palace guards, asking the guard to hand it over to Princess Zhang Lu. Princess Zhang Lu opened the name card and gave it a glance, then casually handed it over to Bai Zhu. After that, she turned to look at Tuoba Haofeng and said, "Tell me, why didn't I hear anything about it this time?" Tuoba Haofeng bowed his head and said carefully, "Young Miss Yu's poetry and painting meeting is just an impromptu idea. The meeting is going to last for 7 days, allowing everyone to display their talents to their heart's content, and strive to produce some exquisite poems and paintings. Today is already the 3rd day. Initially, I wanted to inform Princess earlier, but Princess has been in a bad mood for the past few days. However, young Miss Yu has asked about Princess again today. That's why I boldly entered the palace." Princess Zhang Lu was struck dumb. She glared at Tuoba Haofeng and snapped, "Do I have a bad temper?" An invisible pressure came whistling out, forcing Tuoba Haofeng and a few of his attendants to stagger backward. Tuoba Haofeng was the first to bear the brunt of the pressure, coughing out a mouthful of blood on the spot. Princess Zhang Lu was taken aback, then she smiled embarrassedly and said, "Zhuer, is it true that I have a bad temper these past few days?" Bai Zhuer smiled faintly and said nothing. Shaking her head, Princess Zhang Lu frowned and said, "Tuoba Haofeng, bring me to the meeting at the myriad Red River. Zhuer, bring some men and wait for Marquis Wu at the city gate. When he arrives, ask him to look for us at the myriad Red River. Tell him, if he doesn't come, I'll tear down Duke Yan Li's mansion when I return to the city." Bai Zhuer answered hastily, then brought a couple dozens of palace guards and left on another coach. Princess Zhang Lu and her company went to the myriad Red River. At the same time, Lu Chengfeng was invited by a few important ministers of Great Yan Dynasty to a restaurant for a banquet. The last man in Ji City who had a friendly relationship with Wu Qi, Yan Jiuhui, was summoned by Qin Qingshui to the Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office to participate in the so-called internal purging meeting of Scouting Office. All the people in Ji City who were close to Wu Qi, who had power and information channels, and who could come to his rescue had been transferred away. Chapter 138. His mouth was filled with the fragrant aftertaste of the wine. Wu Qi laughed and waved goodbye to Haoying Fengyi. The banquet took Wu Qi 4 hours. 10 jars of fine wine that had aged over 100 years old were worth the time to savor the aftertaste. These 10 jugs of century-old wine were brewed using the secret technique of the Haoying clan. It was called the 100-fruit and 100-flower honey wine. It was sweet, fragrant, and extremely fragrant, and it had the effect of strengthening the soul and strengthening the vitality of a cultivator. Usually, it was used as a spirit medicine as a tribute, and it was offered to Yen Dan and various members of the imperial clan who held great power during the new year. After drinking the wine, Wu Qi felt a little intoxicated. When he walked, his head felt heavy and his feet felt light, and his mind was not as agile as before. The wine was good, but it was too strong. Wu Qi didn't want to use his innate energy to force out the wine, as it would be a waste of this fine wine. Since Haoying Fengyi had brought him such a fine wine, he had to let it stay in his stomach and slowly digest it. By befriending Haoying Fengyi, not only would he have a helper in Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, he could also form a relationship with Haoying clan. This was a good thing. Riding on the single-horned deer, Wu Qi laughed, spurred the horse and left Mount White Sunday. The sun was high up in the sky, and it was noon. If he rushed back to Ji City, he could still make it in time to have lunch with Lu Qingfeng. Apart from the minor universal teleportation formation, Wu Qi had also crafted several hundred formation discs of various colors. He wanted to give all of them to Lu Qingfeng as he was, after all, studying the Tao of formation, and they would be very helpful to him. With about 70 to 80% of the wine in his body, Wu Qi left Mount White Sun, laughing and singing along the way. Perhaps Wu Qi felt that he had not drunk enough, as he took out another wine jar the size of a human head from his storage ring. He kept pouring wine into his mouth while walking along the main road towards Ji City. The condition of the roads in Great Yen Dynasty was very good. Not only were the roads flat and wide, both sides of the roads were planted with towering trees that stood over 20 feet tall. The shade of the trees formed a huge canopy that blocked the sunlight. The road was cool and refreshing, and no one could feel the heat from the sun. Riding the single-horned elk on the main road, Wu Qi drank wine and tore open his clothes, revealing a large part of his chest, singing loudly all the way. For some unknown reason, although the main road leading to Ji City was usually crowded with carriages and pedestrians, Wu Qi was the only one walking on the road today. Looking ahead and back along the straight road, he couldn't see a single person for several tens of li. However, Wu Qi, who was still intoxicated, did not notice this. He continued to enjoy the cool breeze all the way, singing and drinking to his heart's content. All of a sudden, a barely discernible cry came from a patch of reed-like grass under a few trees by the roadside. "Help, help!" The cry for help came from a woman's gentle voice. Along with the cry for help came the sound of a dozen or so people hurriedly flying away. The wind came blowing from the patch of grass, bringing a pungent smell of blood to Wu Qi's nostrils. Casually, Wu Qi threw away the wine jar, laughed wildly and leaped into the air. With just a few steps, he arrived at the patch of grass, casually throwing out a punch. A muffled boom rang out, and the patch of grass within the circumference of several tens of feet was shattered into pieces by the force of the punch. Countless bits of grass were blown away by the strong wind, revealing 2 broken carriages lying in the grass patch. They were 2 luxurious carriages inlaid with gold and jade. Those who could ride in such carriages were either rich or noble. But now, the carriages were violently smashed into pieces like firewood. 6 magnificent beasts were lying next to the carriages. Next to the beasts were over 30 men, who were no longer breathing. Their necks were nearly chopped off, and a large amount of internal organs were oozing out from the hideous wounds on their bodies. The strong wind came blowing from the front, bringing the gentle voice of a woman. The woman was still screaming for help, but very soon, her mouth seemed to be muffled, and she could no longer make any sound. The sound of breaking wind went further and further away, and before long, it had already traveled a few miles away. Wu Qi's ears twitched, and his divine sense had already locked onto the sound that was going further away. He laughed in a strange tone and said indifferently, "Old trick, really too old trick. Luring the enemy deep in, luring the snake out of its hole, ambushing from 10 sides, what else can I say except old trick? But, for a young hero with a sense of justice like me, aren't I born for this kind of scene?" Then he patted the head of the single-horned deer. The deer let out a long and sonorous cry, then chased after the direction where the sound of breaking wind had disappeared like a gust of wind. While gulping down the wine, Wu Qi raised his head and shouted to the sky, "Young lady, don't worry, with me here, no one can touch a single hair of yours. Hey, you bastards, in broad daylight, you're raping innocent women. Is there any justice left in this world? Is there any law left?" While yelling and yelling all sorts of nonsense, Wu Qi rode his horse and chased after them for several dozens of miles. Above a large expanse of long grass, he saw a group of dozens of men in black, leaping out from the grass from time to time, stepping on the tips of the grass and sprinting forward at top speed. These men had the cultivation base of peak Hotian realm, and that was why they could step on the grass and fly forward at top speed. However, their meridians were not long enough, and after they sprinted forward for a short distance, they would have to land on the grass and catch their breath. That was why Wu Qi could catch up with them so easily. On the shoulder of the leading man in black, there was a young girl, who was clad in a long white dress and had her mouth stuffed with a piece of white cloth. The young girl was struggling with all her might. Once in a while, she raised her head and saw Wu Qi approaching her at top speed from a distance of several hundred feet away. Her beautiful big eyes were filled with a boundless joy. Hastily, she turned to look at Wu Qi and tried her best to let out a cry for help. Once again, Wu Qi cried out with a stern voice, "You bastard! How can we allow people like you to do whatever you want in the territory of Great Yan Dynasty? Quickly follow me into the city, and I might still be able to beg for mercy in front of His Majesty. You are robbing girls right outside of G City. This is not giving His Majesty any face, you are slapping His Majesty's face." Wu Qi continued with a loud voice, "If it was during the period when 8 princes were supervising the state, I would have nothing to say when you are slapping their face. But, during these 2 months, His Majesty has come out from his secluded cultivation and personally came to the imperial court to handle the state affairs. How dare you commit such an illegal act during the period when His Majesty is ruling the state? You are not giving His Majesty any face. You, all of you should have your entire clan executed." Suddenly, the group of fleeing men in black halted their steps. A cold gleam flashed, as a dozen oddly shaped long blades spun in all directions, slicing out an empty space of several tens of feet in circumference in the middle of the long grass. Surprisingly, these men in black had formed a standard formation that could only be found in an army, charging towards Wu Qi with a defensive stance and an offensive stance. The leader of the men in black cried out sternly, "This fellow is annoying. Let's kill him and continue our journey." These men in black raised their left hands. Suddenly, a large sheet of cold gleam shot out from under their sleeves, as countless tiny needles that were as fine as cow hair were activated by a machine. Together with a faint fishy aroma, they thrust towards Wu Qi. These needles were even finer than cow hair, and they took on a dark red hue. Together with the strange poisonous aroma, one could easily tell that these needles were dipped in a deadly poison. Wu Qi let out a loud laugh, then forcefully shook the wine jar in his hand. The wine inside the jar clattered noisily, and countless crystal-clear water droplets shot out from the jar, accurately hitting nearly 1,000 tiny needles. The needles were knocked back by the wine and pierced into the bodies of those men in black. These men in black let out miserable howls, while a large amount of white smoke rose from their bodies. In just a blink of an eye, their bodies had turned into a puddle of pus. Wu Qi could not help but gasp and murmured, "This is indeed the world of immortals, where one can fly freely in the sky and burrow underground. Even this deadly poison is so deadly, many times more poisonous than the prickles I brought out from Meng Mountains. Tiske, even if it is just aqua regia, how long would it take to corrode a person into a puddle of pus?" Shaking his head and sighing, Wu Qi leaped down from his mount, staggered a little, and slowly walked towards the girl who was thrown onto the empty ground by the leader of the men in black. After burping a few times, Wu Qi shouted from afar, "Miss, are you all right? Seeing that your clothes are still intact, I suppose the most important thing for a woman is still with you. You should be fine." As he staggered a few feet away from the girl had already pulled off the white cloth that covered her mouth. Panicked, the pretty girl threw herself at Wu Qi's thigh and said, "Save me, my benefactor, please save me. I'm in a great calamity, please take pity on me." Laughing wildly, Wu Qi thrust his leg up and gave the girl a heavy kick on her face, sending her flying several hundred feet away. The girl waved her arms and legs in the air, howling miserably. A large amount of blood sprayed out from her mouth, and at the same time, a large handful of white and shiny teeth sprayed out from her mouth. The girl screamed miserably and fell heavily to the ground. After a long time, she stood up tremblingly from the ground. The girl, who had a large black footprint in the middle of her face and blood kept gushing out from her mouth, cried out in a stern voice, "Wu Qi, how did you find out my flaw?" She turned her left hand over, and a strangely shaped dagger appeared in the girl's hand. The dagger was no longer than a finger, and was as thin as a cicada's wing and as narrow as a willow leaf. The dagger was completely black, as if it had been coated with a thick layer of black paint. At first glance, anyone could tell that this dagger had been dipped in poison. If she had approached Wu Qi just now, as long as this dagger slightly scratched Wu Qi's thigh, nothing good would have happened to him. Staring at the dagger in the girl's hand, Wu dumbfounded and couldn't believe it. He dropped the wine jar and gave the girl an answer that he didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. You're with these bandits? Heavens, luckily this Marquis is lucky. This Marquis has drunk too much, and kicking people has already become a habit. As soon as I saw you pouncing towards this Marquis, your head looked as round as a ball." The girl was stunned, letting the blood drip down from her chin and stain her clothes. After a full 3 breaths of time, the girl finally raised her head and screamed in exasperation, "Wu Qi, how dare you make fun of me? I don't care if you're just used to it, or if you've really found out that something is wrong. You're dead today. All of you, come out and kill this bastard for me." Suddenly, the sound of sharp swords being unsheathed rang out from several thousand feet away. Sword lights flashed in all directions. At least 32 warriors of body-strengthening tier of Xiantian realm and above were walking slowly towards Wu Qi with swords in their hands. Behind those Xiantian warriors came the sound of orderly and heavy footsteps. Wu Qi's ears twitched slightly. Judging from the sound, he could tell that he was surrounded by at least 3,000 well-trained soldiers. For a Xiantian warrior, it was extremely difficult to kill a real Xiantian warrior, no matter if it was an army of thousands of men and horses, or a group of warriors of the same level. Only by using a group of Xiantian warriors who had an absolute advantage, and then using a large number of soldiers to besiege the enemy, could they have a 100% chance of killing a Xiantian warrior. 32 Xiantian warriors of physique strengthening tier and more than 3,000 elite soldiers. They wouldn't stop until they killed Wu Qi. Sighing lightly, Wu Qi looked at the 32 warriors, who were approaching him step by step, and said in a long voice, "It's not just these people, right? Are there any more ambushes? Come out. It looks like I'm going to die here. Show me all the arrangements you've made, so that I can die in peace." After a long silence, a gust of wind suddenly rolled up from the ground, and on top of a small mound 3 miles away, 2 Jin Dan human immortal cultivators appeared out of nowhere. One of them shouted in a low voice, "Wu Qi, you're going to die here today." Chapter 139. He took out a jar of wine from his storage ring and drank 2 mouthfuls of it. After that, Wu Qi looked at the group of 32 warriors of Xiantian realm who were approaching him, and the several thousand soldiers who were hiding behind the tall grasses in all directions. Suddenly, he let out a loud laugh and said, "Am I going to die here today? Hee, you have mobilized the army without permission, and that is a serious crime. A serious crime. But this is not right, not right." After a few laughs, Wu Qi's smile froze abruptly. Bewildered, he sprung up and stood on the tip of a tall grass, frowning as he stared at those soldiers who were approaching him from all directions. These 3,000 elite soldiers were grouped in groups of 3 to 5, forming a siege formation that covered an area of 10 miles in circumference. Each of them stood over 9 feet tall, looking strong and muscular. Judging from the aura emanated from them, they were all peak-stage Hotian warriors. 3,000 peak-stage Hotian soldiers. Even Little Meng City couldn't gather so many experts in such a short period of time. Also, Great Yen Dynasty had never heard of any army that consisted entirely of peak-stage Hotian warriors. Furthermore, the armor worn by these soldiers was not the green or black armor commonly used by Great Yen Dynasty's army. Instead, they were wearing a crimson battle skirt, and the armor they wore was a striking chain mail made of pale golden fish scales. There were 3 layers of armor inside and outside the armor, and on the outside was a thick and heavy plate armor made from 1,000 refined steel. With an armor like this, even a full-force strike from a Xiantian warrior would not be able to hurt the person inside. On top of that, all these soldiers were wearing a metal mask with a grin on their face. 2 small prismatic crystals were mounted on their eyes, covering their eyes tightly, making it impossible to see the changes in their expressions and the direction they were looking at. The armor covered their entire body from top to bottom, and even their palms were covered by a steel gauntlet. Not a single bit of skin and flesh could be seen on their bodies. This was not the standard army of Great Yen Dynasty, but the private army of some powerful clan. Wu Qi laughed dryly and said, "I never thought there would be such a strong force in Ji City. TSK, is it really necessary for you to do this just for Wu Qi?" After being kicked by him, the girl's tall nose collapsed, her silver teeth fell out, and blood flowed out of her mouth. She scolded him sternly, "Cut the crap. You will die here today." Wu Qi, Market Onion, how long have you been in Ji City? How many people have you ruined? Do you have any idea how many people in Ji City want you dead? All of you, attack and cut him into pieces. Innocently shrugging his shoulders at the girl, Wu Qi forced a smile and said, "Am I that sinful? How many people can't wait for me to die?" Although that was what he said, Wu Qi gave it a careful thought. Perhaps, there were quite a number of people in Ji City who wished for his death. Qin Qingshui, Haoying Clan, Taba Ao, Wei Xiaoxiao, and some other people who were involved in this matter, perhaps all of them wanted to hack him into pieces. While Wu Qi was about to argue with the girl again, the group of 32 Xiantian warriors did not give Wu Qi the chance to speak any further. 4 sword beams leaped up into the sky, transforming into 4 lightning bolts and thrusting towards Wu Qi's vital body parts. The other 28 sword beams flashed across the sky, following the trajectory of 28 constellations in the sky, wheeling rapidly around the spot where Wu Qi was standing, sealing off the surrounding area. Breathing out a long sigh, Wu Qi threw away the wine jar in his hand, shook his head helplessly and said, "I have a feeling that I'm the main character in a novel who is ruined." Of course, you don't know what a novel is, and you won't understand that it's impossible for you to kill a monstrous main character like me. A wolf howl soared into the sky, as the sword of Greedy Wolf transformed into a 10-feet-long dark beam and thrust out whistling. 7 shadows of wolf heads, each the size of a human head, wheeled and slammed around the dark beam, bringing up an immense cold air. The piercingly cold sword energy spread in all directions, shredding all the tall grasses in the surroundings. Then, they transformed into a several hundred feet tall green wind dragon and soared into the sky. The sword beam flashed, and the heads of 4 Xiantian warriors flew high up into the sky. Their blood sprayed and splashed all over the sky. The sword of Greedy Wolf had chopped off the heads of 4 Xiantian warriors who were waving their swords at Wu Qi, devouring all their blood essence and souls, leaving nothing for Wu Qi. Suddenly, a faint blood-red hue burst out from the pitch-black body of the sword of Greedy Wolf, as a wolf howl that could shake one's soul was heard faintly echoing out. The faces of the surrounding Xiantian warriors fell instantly. Controlling the sword beam to protect himself, Wu Qi's eyes flashed with a strange, 4-colored gleam. Looking at those Xiantian warriors, he grinned hideously and said, "Today, I'll let you know how big the gap is between you, a cultivator with spirit root, and a bunch of warriors of Xiantian realm. Then he pointed his finger out. The 7 wolf heads near the dark beam transformed from the sword of greedy wolf, let out a wild howl, then leaped towards the 28 warriors together with an immense cold air. Blood-red light kept flashing and flashing. Wherever the wolf heads passed, no matter it was a sword or a human body, they were all shattered into pieces. 28 human bodies, which were brimming with blood and chi, were ripped to shreds. Before their blood and flesh could spray out even 1 foot away, all their blood essence had been devoured by the sword of greedy wolf. Eventually, the broken bodies fell to the ground, turning into grayish-white dried meat powder. Suddenly, the sword of greedy wolf let out a joyful cry, while the blood-red hue on its body grew stronger. Kill! A deep, muffled battle cry soared up into the sky, as 100 soldiers formed a triangular formation and charged towards Wu Qi. Their steps were as loud as thunder, their blades as bright as snow, and their iron spears as thick as a forest. Behind them, 12 archers pulled the trigger of their crossbows and shot towards Wu Qi. 108 pure steel bolts were shot whistling through the air, piercing straight towards Wu Qi's body. The momentum of this charge from 100 soldiers was comparable to the murderous aura and killing intent emanated from an ordinary army of 3,000 soldiers. Ridiculous! Wu Qi's eyes flickered as he sneered and said, "I'm a cultivator, not a warrior of Xiantian realm. The sword of greedy wolf in my hand is a lower-tier magical treasure." Pointing his finger out, he injected a stream of innate energy into the sword of greedy wolf. Abruptly, the sword buzzed, and a clump of airwave exploded on the sword beam. Before the pure steel bolts could get close to Wu Qi, they were twisted and broken by the pale black airwave. The black sword beam streaked out like a waterfall. Wherever it went, 3 layers of armors were torn apart like pieces of paper, human bodies were ripped apart, weapons were broken, and broken limbs were piled up on the ground. In just 2 breaths of time, all 100 soldiers who charged towards Wu Qi were killed on the spot. After devouring a great amount of energy essence and blood essence, the sword of greedy wolf let out a joyful cry. The murderous aura emanating from it grew stronger and stronger, and the connection between it and Wu Qi's divine sense became even closer. Vaguely, there was even a sense of intimacy, as if it was a child being transmitted to Wu Qi. This strange weapon, which had been lying idle in the cave abode of sword stems from the mind for many years, had finally drunk its fill of blood today. Instinctively, it had taken Wu Qi, who was controlling it to kill, as its real parent. With great astonishment, the white-clothed girl stared at the warriors of Xiantian realm and 100 soldiers who were easily killed by Wu Qi. With her body trembling, she cried out, "How could your ability of controlling a sword be so strong? Honorable patriarchs, please lend me a hand." 2 Jin Dan human immortals, who were standing idly on a small hill a few miles away, could no longer hold their ground. When Wu Qi killed 32 warriors of Xiantian realm, they had begun to approach the battlefield. When Wu Qi killed 100 elite soldiers with a single sword strike, they were only less than 2,000 feet away from the battlefield, and had surrounded Wu Qi from the front and back. Both of them stared at Wu Qi with a stern look in their eyes. 2 sword beams, 1 green and 1 white, each about 8 feet long, were aimed at Wu Qi from a distance. "We've made a mistake." One of the Jin Dan human immortals stared at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "I thought we don't have to do anything as we can kill you here. But I never thought that you are such a tough nut to crack, and even need us, 2 mighty immortals, to deal with a junior like you." Sword cries towered into the sky, as strange signs appeared behind the 2 Jin Dan human immortals at the same time. They should be cultivating the same sword technique, as a forest of swords emerged behind them at the same time. Countless tiny and sharp swords soared into the sky, emanating razor-sharp sword energies that filled the air. Within an area of 1,000 feet, all the tall grasses and shrubs were sliced into pieces. Although the strange signs of these 2 human immortals were filled with murderous auras, in Wu Qi's eyes, their sword techniques were far weaker than the ones cultivated by the Jin Dan human immortals of heaven-breaking sword sect. The forest of swords behind them was scattered but not condensed, and the sword beams they emitted were drifting in and out of focus. Obviously, their core energies had not truly condensed yet. Compared to the Jindan human immortals of heaven-breaking sword sect who specialized in cultivating the Tao of swords, although they were also Jindan human immortals, their actual strength was far weaker. However, no matter what, they were human immortals of Jindan. Although Wu Qi had formed a Jindan, he was unwilling to expose his true cultivation in front of them. Always keeping a trump card was the way to survive in this world. A player who revealed all his trump cards would only end up being wiped clean by his opponent. He casually took out an explosive talisman and threw it into the sky. The talisman, which was infused with vital energy, shot up 1,000 feet into the sky like an arrow and exploded abruptly in the air. Amidst the loud explosion, Wu Qi cried out with a stern voice, 80 wild female bears have just arrived in the bear den in the beast garden of the imperial palace. Each of them is still a virgin. Whoever has contributed a great merit today, I'll let him enter the bear den and enjoy for 3 days. Along with Wu Qi's loud roar, the roars of beasts that caused the earth to tremble suddenly came from all directions. 6 wild bears, ranging from 20 to 30 feet in height, were covered with green fur, and under their fur were thick dark green scales. Their eyes were red, and their mouths were wide open, spraying white saliva. They leaped up from the tall grass in the distance, stepped on a violent demon wind, and dashed toward Wu Qi and Wu Qi with a deafening noise. Wherever they passed, a violent wind would wreak havoc. Before those heavily armored elite soldiers could react, they were swept up into the sky by the violent wind and fell to the ground, half dead. The 2 human immortals of Jindan, who were busy announcing the death penalty for Wu Qi, were so scared that their clothes were soaked in cold sweat. 6 demon bears who had formed their demon cores, and all of them were at least in the middle stage of Jindan, which meant that their cultivation was more than 10 times higher than theirs. Oh my god, 6 demon immortals. Moreover, they were demon bears, which were the most famous among the demon immortals for their violence. The 2 human immortals of Jindan screamed miserably. Like headless flies, they stepped on their sword beams and fled. They no longer had the temperament of immortals that they had a moment ago. But where could they run? 6 huge bears leaped at them from all directions. 12 huge bear paws slapped down, bringing with them a green wind, and slapped the 2 sword beams to the ground. After that, the 6 bears pounced on the 2 human immortals of Jindan, who were lying on the ground and coughing out blood. Then, they raised their feet and gave them a series of violent stomps. Bang, 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 bang. The ground was shaking violently. Blood kept bursting out from the 7 apertures of the 2 human immortals of Jindan. Soon, all their muscles and bones were broken, and they could only exhale but not inhale. Wu Qi panicked. These 2 human immortals of Jindan were of great use to him. Hastily, he rushed down and gave a few kicks on the buttocks of the 6 demon bears, driving them far away. After that, Wu Qi leaped beside the 2 human immortals of Jindan, pressed both hands tightly on their dantian, and cried out sternly, "You can't die! You can't die! Wake up! Wake up! Who is your master? Who is your master? Tell me! Tell me!" Suddenly, a deafening battle cry rang out from all directions. A large group of elite soldiers, clad in blood-red battle skirts and cloaks, and their armors were also as red as blood, suddenly appeared out of nowhere. They formed into a battle formation and charged towards the girl in white and the 3,000 private soldiers. For a moment, the sound of the battle resounded through the sky. Chapter 140. The surface of the myriad red river was still as green as before, and the red leaves and flowers were still flowing down the river with a fierce passion. Today, not even a single pleasure boat could be seen in the myriad red river. The patrol boats of Great Yen Dynasty's navy were patrolling back and forth on the surface of the river, completely sealing it off. A wooden platform was built in the middle of the river, made from rare and precious wood. It measured nearly 100 acres in circumference, and a few pavilions and verandas were built on top of it. The platform was even paved with soil, and many rare and precious flowers were planted on top of it. A few thousand young men were clad in white robes and had a tall hat made of goose feathers on their heads. They sat solemnly on the wooden platform, listening to a young girl who was kneeling on a mat in the middle of the platform, reading a book of poems. The voice of the young girl was calm and cold, without any ups and downs. It was just like the surface of the myriad red river under the wooden platform, a clear and chilling green color. She was also clad in a white robe, and a tall hat made of goose feathers was placed on her head. As she looked around, a strong air of elegance of a scholar could be sensed. She had an ordinary appearance, and in this world where beautiful women could be found everywhere, it could only be considered as an inferior appearance. However, because of her temperament that was completely different from all the young men around her, it made her look like a swan that stood high up in the sky, while all the men around her looked like a toad. Even those pretty serving ladies who were quietly shuttling back and forth among the crowd, pouring tea for the people, when compared to this young girl, they were like sparrows that had just seen a phoenix, completely losing their color. Although she was not a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city or a state, but the so-called peerless beauty and grace were probably referring to someone like her. A long green thread was tied to the corner of the table in front of the young girl, and at the other end of the thread was a kite shaped like a fan. On the surface of the kite made from white paper, a few baby swallows were drawn with faint ink, flying around a willow branch. Although they were just a few insignificant strokes, they vividly portrayed the vitality of the baby swallows, as if a few real swallows made of flesh and blood were spreading their wings on the kite. Suddenly, the young girl put down the book of poems in her hand, picked up a jade paperweight, and lightly slapped it on the table in front of her. Followed by a loud and clear popping noise, the thousands of young men on the wooden platform all lowered their heads and listened carefully to the girl. The astonishingly bright eyes of the young girl swept a glance at the crowd of young men. The young girl chuckled, then cried out, "Which young master has written a great poem? Please present it to me." If there are no more poetry books for Qianqian to comment on, Qianqian will ask for a new topic today, allowing all of you to show off your literary talent on the spot. The young girl glanced at all the young men around her, chuckled and said, "It's the same as the previous years. If any young master can win the competition with a poem, he or she can travel with Qianqian for 3 days after the competition is over." The young girl's cultivation base was not low. Although she did not put too much force into her shout, it still spread out to a distance of tens of miles away. All the sailors on the sentry boats could hear it clearly, and unconsciously, they all turned to look at the wooden platform. Naturally, Princess Zhonglu, who was riding a ferry and rushing to the wooden platform in the middle of the river, heard the young girls shout as well. Pfft! Princess Zhonglu chuckled, shook her head and said mockingly, "This old woman is already in her 20s, yet she still can't get married. She's playing the same trick again." 3 days of traveling with her, Yu Qianqian, is that considered a good fortune? Over the years, many men have traveled with her. Why don't I see her choosing one of them and marrying him off? Tuoba Haofeng, who was standing gingerly behind Princess Zhonglu, dared not to say a word. He just kept glancing at Princess Zhongli's body, and only lowered his head carefully, his eyes still lingering on the hem of Princess Zhongli's dress. Princess Zhonglu snorted coldly, then suddenly smiled sweetly and said with a sweet voice, "Is that Sister Yu Qianqian? Why didn't you inform Zi Xian about the competition when it has been held for 2 days? Sister Yu, aren't you bullying me? Zi Xian won't let you off easily. This time, I must punish you by drinking 3 cups of fine wine to your heart's content. I've even brought the wine cup with me." With a flip of her jade-like palm, Princess Zhonglu, with a belly full of evil intentions, took out a purple gold rice dipper from her storage ring, which was twice the size of the white jade wine dipper used by Jing Ku. She happily placed it on her palm and showed it to Wu Qi. Sitting in the middle of the wooden platform, Yu Qianqian's expression flickered slightly. She stared at the purple gold rice cup in Princess Zhongli's palm, and her face turned extremely unsightly. But soon, Yu Qianqian adjusted her expression. She rose to her feet slowly, then said in a low voice with a cold face, "Qianqian welcomes the arrival of Princess." The important task of inviting Princess is given to young Master Tuoba. Why did he still invite Princess here today? You can't blame Qianqian for this. If you want to blame someone, blame it on young Master Tuoba. Since I don't have the courage to taste the 3 cups of fine wine, why don't I ask young Master Tuoba to do it for me? Tuoba Haofeng's face turned blue. Was the punishment wine served by Princess Zhang Lu really tasty? Without batting an eyelid, he took a few steps back. When he raised his head up, his face was filled with a bright smile. He did not answer Yu Qianqian's question, but kept cupping his fist and greeting all the young men on the wooden platform. Among the several thousand young men on the wooden platform, about 1/3 of them rose to their feet and bowed deeply to Princess Zhang Lu, addressing her as princess. On the other hand, the other 2/3 of the young men were kneeling on the ground, deeply touching their foreheads on the carpet and bowing deeply to Princess Zhang Lu. These young men who only cupped their fists and bowed to Princess Zhang Lu were the sons of influential and wealthy clans. They had a special privilege, as they did not have to kneel and bow to the princess in an informal setting. On the other hand, the rest of the young men were scholars who came from the common folk of Ji City. They were talented and learned, but they did not have any power or influence. Therefore, they had to bow to the princess like how a subject would greet a monarch. Princess Zhang Lu threw a proud glance at these young men who bowed down to her. She snorted coldly and said, "Get up, all of you. This is young Miss Qianqian's gathering of poetry and painting. There's no need to be overly courteous." After all the young men rose to their feet, only then did Princess Zhang Lu float up into the air, crossing over 1,000 feet of water and landing lightly on the wooden platform. 8 ghost immortals carried by Zhuorup summoned a chilly breeze and brought all the palace guards who were on the same ship to the platform. Tuoba Haofeng shook his head slightly. He sprung up, tapped his feet on the surface of the water a few times, and carefully stepped onto the wooden platform. When Princess Zhang Lu stepped onto the wooden platform, Yu Qianqian quickly came up to her. Although there was still a distance of 70 to 80 feet between them, both of them stretched out their arms and greeted each other. Princess Zhang Lu gave a loud laugh and said, "Sister Yu, this is Zi Xian's 5th time participating in your gathering of poetry and painting. I think this gathering of yours has been held for the 13th time, right?" Yu Qianqian's expression flickered. When she was 14 years old, her name had shaken Ji City with a painting and a poem. Her fame had quickly overshadowed her father and grandfather, who were the chief editors of Great Yan Dynasty. Her reputation as a talented girl had spread across the world. However, when Princess Zhang Lu pointed out that this gathering of poetry and painting had been held for the 13th time, she was mocking her for not getting married at the age of 27. Clenching her teeth tightly, Yu Qianqian chuckled and said, "That's right. Time flies, and if I'm not careful enough, I'll grow old. But I do want to congratulate Your Highness, Jin Dan, for you have attained the body of a human immortal. With such a youthful appearance, I suppose you'll still be young and beautiful in the next few hundred years. At that point of time, I'm sure there will be countless young men who will bow down to you." Princess Zhang Lu was mocking Yu Qianqian for not getting married at the age of 27, while Yu Qianqian did not show any weakness and prayed that Princess Zhang Lu would not get married even after several hundred years. Both of them had a very intimate expression and attitude, like they were the best of friends, but their words were filled with the smell of gunpowder. Amidst the laughter, Princess Zhang Lu and Yu Qianqian hugged each other tightly. Princess Zhang Lu put her little mouth next to Yu Qianqian's ear, sneered and said, "What kind of trick did Sister Yu come up with today to confuse people?" Yu Qianqian whispered into Princess Zhang Li's ear, giggled and said, "My little princess, aren't you worried that Sister Yu will steal all the young men around you? Hee hee, I heard that young Master Tuoba has been having a very close relationship with Princess for the past 2 years. If Sister Yu can make young Master Tuoba become my sister's admirer in just a few moves, will my little princess get angry again?" Princess Zhang Lu twitched her little mouth, sneered indifferently and said, "You can steal whoever you want. That rascal Tuoba Haofeng, why would I put him in my eyes? Why don't I beg my father to issue an imperial decree, betrothing Sister Yu to Tuoba Haofeng?" Yu Qianqian's expression changed. After that, she quickly took a few steps back, chuckled and said, Young masters, it is our good fortune to have Princess Zhonglu here today. Princess Zhonglu not only has an outstanding cultivation base, she is also a famous talented girl in Great Yan Dynasty. Her ink painting of birds and beasts is the best under the heaven. Why don't we let Princess Zhonglu paint a painting for us on the spot? Princess Zhongli's expression changed instantly, while Yu Qianqian narrowed her eyes and smiled. Chapter 141. Coughing lightly, Wu Qi cried out loudly, "Princess Wu Qi is here." Bai Zhuer stuck out her chest, gnashed her teeth and said, "Isn't that right?" Not only did she steal Princess Limelight, she even came up with ways to embarrass Princess in every poetry and painting party. A vicious woman like her. If I don't teach her a good lesson, what will happen to us? Marquis Wu, you have a great ability. This time, you must help our princess to vent her resentment. Wu Qi cupped his fist at Ma Yi. Curiously, he looked at Ma Yi, whose body was shrouded in surging blood and energy, and whose pure yang energy was at least 100 times stronger than an ordinary man. He could not understand why a castrated eunuch like Ma Yi, who was cultivating with a pure yang cultivation technique, was not afraid of being burned alive by the internal flame. But the strange thing was, not only was Ma Yi cultivating with a pure yang cultivation technique, he had also formed the Jin Dan smoothly. This was simply unimaginable. So, this is the grudge between Princess and Yu Qianqian? Wu Qi stared blankly at Bai Zhuer, who poked her head out from the window, and could not react for a long while. The sound of footsteps rang out as Ma Yi, clad in a blood-red official outfit, with a large blade hanging from his waist, came striding over, escorted by a group of 100 fearsome soldiers. On his purple-red face, Ma Yi's deep eyes narrowed into a thin line, gleaming with a dangerous and ferocious gleam as he kept glancing at those private soldiers who were captured alive. Right after he stepped onto the wooden platform, Wu Qi saw Princess Zhongli sitting behind a long narrow table in the middle of the room. Her face was green, then red, then green, then green. Obviously, she was extremely embarrassed. A young girl, clad in a white robe and wearing a white goose feather crown on her head, was standing right next to Princess Zhongli with her hands clasped behind her back. She was whispering something to Princess Zhongli, causing her expression to become more and more unsightly. The armors worn by these blood-armored soldiers, as well as the weapons they used, were all middle-grade and lower-grade magical items. An eerie cold air and a baleful aura that could make one's hair stand on end surrounded their bodies, making these blood armor warriors appear exceptionally austere and terrifying. They were tidying up the battlefield in an orderly manner, collecting the corpses of the dead soldiers and arranging them neatly. Some young men in cyan clothes, whose eyes shone with a shrewd light, were trying to identify the faces of these corpses. The eyes of the Xiongqing brothers narrowed into a thin line. They hurriedly nodded and bowed to thank Wu Qi. At this time, they no longer had any dignity as demon immortals. They were clearly a group of lechers who could not wait to go to the bear den and pamper the female bears they had just captured from the forest. For a long time, Wu Qi could not figure out what was going on. He hastily asked Bai Zhuer who Yu Qianqian was, what was the grudge between her and Princess Zhonglu, and what was wrong with her poetry and painting party. Clearing his throat, Wu Qi turned to Ma Yi, smiled and said, "Deputy Ma, I'll leave the matters here to you." If not because Deputy Ma had promised to send out an army to help, Wu Qi would not have the courage to step out from the city gate of Ji City for the past few days. You can't let go of these audacious rebels and traitors. If Princess Zhonglu really knew the art of cursing, she would have long cursed Yu Qianqian to have her face filled with pockmarks, and to be unable to get married for the rest of her life. Bai Zhuer was very eloquent, and she quickly told Wu Qi everything she knew. As demon immortals, Xiongqing brothers had very sensitive ears. They heard Ma Yi's mumbling, and were immediately frightened out of their wits. They hastily covered their nether regions with their hands and chased after Wu Qi. In just a blink of an eye, they had run several thousand feet away, and could no longer be seen. Wu Qi shook his head, rose to his feet, and said to Xiongqing brothers, who were standing behind him with a flattering smile on their faces, "That's right. Tonight, You can go to the bear nest in the beast park and have a good time. Don't worry, I'll send someone to lead the way for you. No one will dare to stop you. Ma Yi grinned, patted heavily on Wu Qi's shoulder, and said indifferently, just leave this place to us. Marquis Tanyun can set his mind at ease and return to the city. His Majesty has made up his mind to get to the bottom of this matter, as well as the assassination of Duke Buji. No matter who is the one behind this, none of them will be able to escape. Shaking his head and sighing along the way, Wu Qi and his company finally arrived at the bank of Myriad Red River. Two Jin Dan human immortals could sense the bizarre transformation in their bodies. They were frightened out of their wits and opened their mouths, wanting to scream out loud. The sword of Greedy Wolf pierced through their Dan Tian in a blink of an eye, piercing through their Jin Dan and devouring all their spirit, energy, and soul. Mai did not know whether to laugh or cry when he saw the actions of Xiong Qing and his brothers. He glared angrily at the backs of Xiong Qing and his brothers, then stroked his chin thoughtfully and said, "Recently, there is a shortage of manpower in the imperial palace. Should I kill these few lecherous bears one day and bring them into the imperial palace as eunuchs? A few of them can be used to brew some wine for His Majesty to nourish his body." For so many years, apart from those unlucky fellows who had their entire clan wiped out overnight by some natural or man-made calamity, all the other clans who married a daughter of Yu clan would achieve a meteoric rise in power within a few decades. Some of them would hold a high position in the imperial court, and some of them would become wealthy merchants who could rival a country in the field of commerce. There had never been an exception. Therefore, the daughter of Yu clan was an extremely sought-after resource in Great Yan Dynasty, 100 times more sought after than the princess of Great Yan Dynasty. Such an outstanding and eye-catching young girl was simply the natural rival of Princess Zhonglu. There was no need for any reason. Ever since Princess Zhonglu became sensible, she and Yu Qianqian did not see eye to eye. Due to the noble status of Yu clan in Great Yan Dynasty, and the lofty status of Yu clan in the hearts of those scholars in Great Yan Dynasty, Princess Zhonglu and Yu Qianqian always addressed each other as sisters in front of the public. Behind their backs, Princess Zhonglu had pricked countless paper puppets with Yu Qianqian's name on them with needles. Wu Qi rode the single-horned deer all the way to the city gate of Ji City. He was pondering who was the mastermind behind this assassination attempt, and who could mobilize a private army consisting of 2 Jin Dan human immortals, 32 Xiantian warriors, and 3,000 peak stage Hotian warriors to assassinate him? And who could make Yan Jiuhui and Lu Chengfeng stay in Ji City with a reasonable excuse? If not for the fact that he had prepared some precautions beforehand, laying down a trap half a month in advance, he would have been in deep trouble this time. While he was pondering over all sorts of strange thoughts, Bai Zhuer brought a group of palace guards and rushed out from the room which was originally used as a resting place for the city guards. Excitedly, she grabbed Wu Qi's sleeves. Bai Zhuer, who had a round face and looked adorable, grabbed Wu Qi's arm tightly and cried out, "Marquis Tianyun, our princess has gone to the poetry and painting competition held by young Miss Yu Qianqian. Princess wants us to bring you to the Myriad Red River to look for her. Let's go, let's go." That Yu Qianqian has never been on good terms with Princess. With your glib tongue, I'm sure you can drive that Yu Qianqian to death, can't you? The men of Central Wind Guards are all fools. Relying on his height, Ma Yi looked down at Wu Qi and said with a deep voice, "A private army consisting of 3,000 peak stage Hotian warriors, and yet, Central Wind Guards never heard anything about it. If not because they gathered together to assassinate Marquis Yun, who could imagine that there is such a private army hiding right under His Majesty's feet in Ji City?" Currently, in Yu clan, Yu Qianqian was the only girl who was not married. Therefore, she had attracted the attention of many influential members of Great Yan Dynasty, hoping that they could marry this girl, who had a literary talent that surpassed all the men under the heaven, and possessed an amazing skill in trickery. Ma Yi's eyes shone with a ferocious gleam as he gazed at those green-clothed men who were trying to identify the faces of the corpses. He sneered and said, "Don't worry, this time, it is the High Minister's Swallow and the Blood Swallow army, personally commanded by me. We will bypass the criminal and justice court and scouting office, and I guarantee that we will dig out the ancestral graves of these people. After the Jin Dan was formed in his water meridians, Wu Qi's absorption rate of the blood and energy essence of the cultivators had suddenly increased to 30%. 30% of the energy essence of 2 Jin Dan human immortals was absorbed into his body and was carefully stored in the meridians in both his arms. Both Jin Dan human immortals were cultivating with fire element cultivation technique. The fire element spirit root that originated from their hearts had spread to their lungs and spleen, and half of their bodies had turned into a fiery red color. Amidst the crowd, Sheng Guanyuhan suddenly turned his head and looked at Wu Qi. His gaze was as sharp as a sword, and a sword intent that felt like it was about to pierce through Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi did not waste any more time. He cupped his fist and bowed to Ma. After that, he whistled and summoned the single-horned deer, riding it back to Ji City. Xiong Qing and his brothers greeted Ma Yi lazily, then proudly shrugged their hips and made an action that all male creatures would understand. After that, they giggled and transformed back to their human forms, following behind Wu Qi and left the scene in high spirits. Ma Yi laughed hideously, then said with a low, muffled voice, "Martin, just pretend that you know nothing about what happened here. Let's return to the city now." Ma Yi sneered, lowered his voice and warned, "Duke Yen Lu and the chief supervisor of West Wind Guards are caught by someone today. If not because Mark Hyun has already been taken care of by His Majesty, the Chief General, and the High Prime Minister, secretly mobilizing the Swallow Army and Blood Swallow Army, Mark Hyun would be alone and helpless today." The Yu clan, where Yu Chanxian came from, was a famous noble clan in Great Yen Dynasty. For nearly 1,500 years, Yu clan had always been famous under the heaven for their calligraphy and painting. Every generation of clan leader of Yu clan had served as the chief editor of Great Yen Dynasty, responsible for the collection and compilation of all kinds of history books. Yu clan did not have a large population. Although it had been passed down for several dozens of generations, the population of Yu clan was less than 100 at its peak. A ferry had been waiting for them for a long time, and very soon, it brought Wu Qi to the luxurious wooden platform in the middle of the river. However, no matter it was a male or female member of this clan, all of them were born with a graceful and elegant style of writing, and they were born talented scholars who could recite poems and paint. On top of that, it was a miraculous cultivation technique that was passed down from generation to generation in Yu clan. As a result, all the cultivators of Yu clan, regardless of whether they were men or women, had extraordinary intelligence and were full of tricks. In Great Yen Dynasty, no matter it was the influential nobles, the wealthy merchants, or the ordinary local tyrants, they all regarded it as the luckiest thing to woo a girl from Yu clan and marry into their clan. Forcefully pulling on Wu Qi's reins, Bai Zhuer dragged the single-horned deer and rushed towards the myriad red river. In for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound. Wu Qi exerted all his strength, exerted the strongest force he had now, and stole a tiny thread of innate energy from both of them, using it to replenish his heart and innate nascent embryo. Suddenly, the energy in his heart skyrocketed. With every beat of his heart, more blood would flow into his body, and the energy contained in the blood flowing out from his heart would grow stronger as well. He could also sense that his 5 feet tall innate nascent embryo had slightly expanded, growing taller by 1 centimeter. Very soon, the battle cries stopped. 6,000 elite soldiers clad in blood-red armors and battle skirts, their bodies completely red like blood, had wiped out the private army of 3,000 soldiers led by the girl in white in just a blink of an eye. Only the girl in white and a couple dozens of leaders of the private army were left alive. Each of these 6,000 blood-red soldiers had the cultivation base of respiration tier of Xiantian realm. 6,000 warriors of Xiantian realm were strictly trained using the military drill. Without a doubt, the combative strength of an army like this was extremely frightening. Wu Qi took a deep breath and shook his head helplessly. He put on a pitiful expression and turned to look at Ma. "I'll try my best." Wu Qi laughed dryly and helplessly. How was Wu Qi going to deal with a girl with such spirit of writing? Give her a brutal beating? That was just ridiculous. Speaking of which, some of the unspoken rules of Great Yen Dynasty were really troublesome. Wasn't it easy for a princess to deal with the daughter of a minister? Why did she have to play such petty tricks? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.